After tidying everyone's gifts, Hermione left the dormitory. Harry and Neville were already waiting in the common room. "Oh no, how could Mum be so biased?" Harry complained the moment he saw Hermione, a bright Gryffindor scarf wound around his neck. Neville, by contrast, held nothing. Hermione's own present looked positively extravagant in comparison. Hermione only chuckled and nodded at Neville. He sounded grateful. "Thank you, Hermione. The notes you gave me mean a lot." Neville had always been a solid, chubby sort of boy, Harry liked to say, but the last few months had been hard on him. When he'd been rescued, he was nearly unrecognizable, so thin and pale, and only in the last days at Hogwarts had he begun to recover some strength and spirit. "Come on, hurry," Harry urged. "I heard tonight's feast has dishes you don't even see at Malfoy Manor. If we're late, we'll be stuck with other people's leftovers." The three set off together. Hermione didn't know Neville very well, but Harry's open, cheerful warmth made the walk easy company. "It's a pity Ron went home," Harry sighed. "If he were here, we could sneak out later together. 4 of us under the invisibility cloak would be no problem." "Oh, and I need to take you to see Hagrid," Hermione said. "I wonder how his injuries are. Remind me to pack some good food later. We'll bring it to him tonight." Because the school would be hosting outside guests, the castle was decked in even more lavish Christmas finery than usual. Ribbons and garlands hung everywhere. Many were a little creased and faded, but in this world of scarce resources, they felt luxurious. Tall evergreen trees, no doubt specially tended by the manor, stood in the corners, looking impossibly green given the weather. There were adults, too, not just students, professors with partners, alumni, and a scattering of well-dressed wizards who moved through the crowds with the ease of people at ease in other people's money. Some carried cameras, others clustered with their children. Carols drifted through the corridors, and the scent of food warmed the air. By the time they reached the Great Hall, the ceiling was a bright, starry night, and a soft, magical snowfall drifted slowly down, never touching anyone with cold. A magnificent Christmas tree glittered in one corner. Filch, normally a probationary grouch, wore an almost embarrassed smile as he greeted guests. Many of the professors had taken their places at the staff table, while the 4 house deans, by mutual choice, sat with their tables. Slytherin's side bustled more than usual. Lucius Malfoy had chosen not to return to the manor, his limp still an excuse, and had brought his wife to the feast. Around them clustered a small court of aristocrats, glasses of wine held with white-gloved hands, voices low and polished. Draco sat among them with the posture of someone learning to look natural. His smile was practiced and a little stiff. The house tables themselves were draped in rich cloths. Platters of roast chicken and ribs, glossy and carved, lay shoulder to shoulder with unfamiliar dishes and confections Hermione had never seen. New courses arrived constantly, sent out by house elves who worked like a beehive in the kitchen. "I'll say one thing, Malfoy Manor really went all out," Harry said, eyes wide. Neville, whose time in captivity had given him an almost physical allergy to the sight of decent food, licked his lips and followed Hermione as she made straight for the Gryffindor table. Because some students had gone home, the long table had space enough for Hermione to claim a generous stretch. She hunted and sampled with the enthusiasm of someone who'd read every recipe in a cookbook twice. "How am I supposed to get through cockroach milk and rat legs after this?" Harry moaned, struggling to swallow a mouthful of chocolate pudding while balancing a golden chicken leg in one hand and a forkful of rich pate in the other. He was full already, and yet unwilling to stop. The house elves never stopped. New dishes filled empty plates as if by magic, until the table was groaning under the weight of it all. At last, Dumbledore rose on the dais. He tapped a glass with a silver spoon. The clear ring cut through the murmur and drew every eye. Applause broke out. "Tonight, on this peaceful evening, we welcome the annual festival," Dumbledore said. His voice carried pride and something like relief. "These smiles are what we strive to restore. Winter and death will not defeat us, for in our hearts we keep unyielding hope," he continued, and the hall answered him with cheers. He thanked the Malfoy family for providing the evening's food, which earned another round of clapping and a few sparking crackers bursting open above their heads. Fireworks bloomed beyond the castle windows, throwing colors that flickered over the hall and made everyone's faces radiant. Music rose again, and for a time people stood, pairing off to sing or to dance. Hermione's appetite finally eased. When she looked up, the hall had shifted from frantic indulgence to a softer, warmer scene. Small groups clustered by the tables, some children at their parents' knees, others sipping juice or a modest glass of wine. The room felt like a home full of conversation and easy laughter. Hermione felt it properly then, the Christmas atmosphere, familiar in a way that made her chest ache. She remembered the Christmases in her original life, huddling in a warm burrow with her parents, one small candle burning on the table while they shared a single steaming bowl of soup. She remembered other days too, times in the Forbidden Land before the Golden Blessing faded, when the Altus Plateau had been fertile and their family whole. Both memories, different in detail, separated by lifetimes, stirred the same simple contentment. This, she realized, felt the same. This place was, in its own way, home too. The reminiscing didn't last long before Harry came over with his parents in tow. "You must be Hermione, right? Lily talks about you all the time in her letters." Mr. Potter sounded pleasantly flushed from drink. His hair was as tousled as Harry's, though his eyes were not the same. Harry had his mother's vivid green. "Hello, Mr. Potter," Hermione replied politely, composed and a little flustered. "Harry has been very lucky to have you looking after him at Hogwarts." James rubbed his reddened ears and offered a sheepish grin. "If someone hadn't taken it upon themselves to swap the invisibility cloak, our Harry wouldn't be constantly getting into trouble," he said. Lily's tone from the side was sharp. "James," she snapped, having clearly already scolded him, "that's a Potter family tradition. How can a Potter not have explored the castle under a cloak?" James protested weakly. "Hey, it's tradition! A Potter can't not explore Hogwarts with an invisibility cloak." Lily sighed. "Never mind. He's already had a taste. There's no point confiscating it now. Boys will always find a way to sneak out." Harry, ears pink as his parents, leapt up. "Really, Mum? You're the best! I love you!" Lily pressed Harry's head down with an affectionate hand and turned to Hermione with mock severity. "But Hermione, you mustn't pick up bad habits from them, and make sure they do their own homework. No copying." James looked on, half drunk, half nostalgic, squinting and grinning as if remembering his own mischief. "Oh, by the way, Miss Granger, would you like to come visit us over the summer?" he asked. "We'd love to have you." "Yes, I can introduce you to my godfather and Uncle Lupin," Harry chimed in. "If there's a chance, I'd be honored," Hermione said gratefully. As someone without family to go home to, summer at Hogwarts meant working with and learning from the professors, an opportunity she valued. Professor Flitwick caught her eye from the Ravenclaw table and waved her over. She gave the Potters a quick apologetic look and made her way across the hall. On the way, she saw Professor McGonagall surrounded by colleagues. McGonagall found time to nod and smile at her, and Hermione returned the smile. "Miss Granger, let me introduce you," Flitwick said, from a slightly raised seat. "These are all leading scholars in charms research and the reviewers for post-war spell research." He gestured at the wizards and witches nearest him, men and women in austere, almost medieval robes, their faces lined with age. Hermione felt overawed. The most famous of the group sat in the middle, Miranda Goshawk, author of the Standard Book of Spells series. Flitwick said regretfully that he had been unable to invite Adalbert Waffling, author of Magical Theory, and often called the father of modern magic, a close friend of Dumbledore's. "We've all read your thesis," Miranda said without preamble. "Though the format bears Filius's fingerprints, your particular insight is something his dual-minded brain couldn't have come up with." Flitwick smiled and took the remark in good humor. Miranda, crisp, forthright, and not shy of a barb, softened and continued kindly, raising her hand and conjuring a halo of blue starlight that swirled in her palm. "I heard you are a natural, radiation, no, shining stone magic, user. It's a unique case in the world, so we old folks wanted to meet you." "Shining stone magic is a far better name than radiation magic," another voice agreed. "These men always miss the finer points of nomenclature." Hermione explained that in her thesis, they had already made an initial mastery of 2 strands of the magic. Even aside from their force, The ability to harness and direct that energy more conveniently could be crucial for restoring damaged environments and for expanding safe, sustainable Muggle settlements, she said. The elders listened then to Hermione's surprise. One by one, they lit starlights in their own hands. They were not old fogies set in their ways. They were scholars eager to accept and learn new things. Hermione had expected months, perhaps years, before they would set aside pride to try a first-year spell, but here they were, experimenting in the space of a conversation. "It is an honor, madam," she said, humbly. "Because you've made such a promising start, we old folks now have a direction for our research," Miranda said. "Keep developing this. Don't let us overtake you." Her tone was warm and teasing, like a senior offering earnest counsel to a promising junior. "We'll also make sure the journal pays you proper rates for your manuscript, and you must pester Phileas to help you with the review. He owes you that." Hermione promised, cheeks warm, and eventually extricated herself from the circle. She couldn't face another plate. She felt both exhausted and a little breathless from the attention. The warmth of the great hall felt stifling, so she slipped outside looking for fresh air and a quiet balcony. Instead, she found a huge, molting bird perched on the empty ledge, a phoenix. To her astonishment, when it looked at her, she heard a voice she recognized. It was Dumbledore. She stopped, barely daring to breathe, not wanting to disturb the headmaster's solitude. He spoke first. "Is that Hermione? Minerva has been proud to tell me about you. May I call you Hermione? Since we've met by chance, would you mind if I kept you company for a little while?" Dumbledore added. "Old people don't like being alone." Hermione edged forward carefully, keeping a respectful distance from the great bird. "You know me?" The phoenix turned its head. Its eyes were like veils of dusk and yet keen with intelligence. "You are the child my deputy head is proudest of." Hermione smiled. The quiet attention steadied her courage. "Why aren't you here in person on such a night?" she asked. The bird gave a soft, pensive sound. "Because I need to remind myself that true peace has not yet come." "But people need moments of leisure," Hermione said. "If you're always tense, you'll snap." "You are right, child," the phoenix replied. "Perhaps one day I should let go of my burdens and properly enjoy a fire and dessert." "Desserts? Do you have a favorite?" Hermione asked, surprised. Lemon sherbet," the bird said thoughtfully. "I tried it for the first time tonight. I think I'll always love it." There was a lightness to him now. "Although I must say, my second favorite are cockroach clusters. Proper cockroach clusters from honeydukes in the Scottish Highlands are the real thing." They sat on the cold stone benches and the phoenix, Dumbledore, spoke, and Hermione felt herself drifting along with his memories. An era before the war, rolling green pastures, bagpipes on the wind, the giant squid in the Black Lake, a little wizarding village where Quidditch was every year. Fireworks boomed in the distance, brilliant against the night sky. Beyond the castle wards, wind and snow blurred everything into darkness. "Ah, I've rambled on," Dumbledore said with an apologetic smile. "I only wanted to meet the most promising first year at our school. I'm sorry if I've kept you." "It is my honor to speak with you," Hermione answered. "Phileas has been telling me about your notes. Would you, if it's not too bold, be willing to see my magic, just to satisfy curiosity?" Obligingly, Hermione spread her hands and scattered a field of tiny starlights into the air outside the castle, suspending them like a pocket of new constellations. "How beautiful," murmured the phoenix, "like the true night sky before the war." With a quiet rustle, one small star detached itself from Hermione's field and floated down into Dumbledore's outstretched wing. "Pure and easy to control," he said, peering at it. "Very different from what I witnessed in Chernobyl. Perhaps this is the right way to use such power." Hermione started. There were things she had seen in the Forbidden Land, sages who had driven Shining Stone magic to extremes and paid for it with their lives. The crystallization school, the primeval current, the horror of turning living things into rigid, inorganic forms, things she did not know how to explain. She only managed. Power is a tool. The person who uses it matters more than the power itself. The phoenix regarded her for a long moment, then replied softly, "You are a good child." He cocked his head. "Speaking of which, perhaps I should give you a Christmas gift. Consider it an Easter egg from the headmaster to the most outstanding first year." A sparkling tear welled at the corner of his eye, glinting like a tiny comet. It solidified in the air into a clear, perfect diamond and fell into Hermione's hand. It thrummed with a startling vitality. She could feel, in a way she could not explain, that if she were grievously wounded, it could save her life. "Well, the rambling old man will be off," the phoenix said, shaking his feathers and preparing to take flight. Hermione had one last question. "Professor, about that night in the forbidden corridor on the 4th floor, did you know we were there?" The phoenix tilted its head, a half smile in its expression. "Did I? I'm getting old. My memory isn't what it used to be. But I envy you all. Youth and adventure are things I never tire of hearing about." With a single whoosh of flame and feather, the phoenix vanished. Hermione puffed out her cheeks at his vagueness, so maddeningly vague, and then went back inside, the gem burning like a promise in her palm. 43. Campus Life. The festive mood in the castle lasted through the whole holiday, even after everyone who was not a student had left by flu or broom early the next morning. For days afterward, the house elves and students still moved as if they were under last night's spell, even after the fir trees and mistletoe were gone by the 3rd day. Nothing else of note happened in the castle. The dark wizard from the Green Flame Party appeared to be truly frightened off and never showed his face again. Even at Christmas, an ideal time for mischief, he stayed silent. Hermione spent the holiday bent over the crystallized phoenix tear Dumbledore had given her. She discovered that it was very similar in nature to the crystallized dewdrop of the golden tree. In the Forbidden Land, there was a profession akin to a perfumer, but of higher rank, the elixirist. Elixirists were the golden tree's divine envoys. By blending different kinds of crystallized dewdrops in precise ratios, they could create elixir holy grail flasks, potent draughts that could instantly mend grievous wounds, purge stubborn curses and corruptions, or grant the drinker tremendous power, enough to casually cast forbidden spells. The phoenix tear, however, did not contain any miraculous or exotic properties. It simply held an exceptionally vigorous life force, roughly equivalent to the red crystallized dewdrop of the golden tree. When included in an elixir, that kind of dewdrop could restore someone from near death to full health instantly. Compared with the potion of Wiggenweld or Skelligro, the Forbidden Land's elixirs were ridiculously powerful. Their effects were immediate and absolute, but they were also vanishingly rare. In peacetime, only the great nobles of the Golden Dynasty, or the most powerful tarnished and fallen Golden Tree avatars, ever saw them. Lesser red and blue Holy Grail dewdrops were treasures many people would never encounter in a lifetime. After a few days of study, Hermione realized she could not hope to reproduce an elixir Holy Grail flask herself. The Fallen who once used them had never recorded the precise manufacturing methods, they only knew how to use the elixirs. Moreover, the flasks required blending 2 different crystallized dewdrops for full effect, and she had only a single phoenix tear. Even if she managed to bottle something, it would be useless. Reluctantly, she put the crystallized tear away and kept it as an emergency charm. On the last day of the holiday, Professor Flitwick arrived with the newest issue of post-war spell research. Hermione's paper took the front column. Madame Goshawk, whom Hermione had met before, wrote an enthusiastic commentary praising Hermione's theory of shining stone magic, and arguing that any wizard who ventured alone should at least understand its principles. Doing so would greatly reduce the danger of entering forbidden places. At the end of the piece, Goshawk looked ahead optimistically, calling it a first step toward reclaiming the core and reviving their homeland. Also that day, Ron finally escaped Mrs. Weasley's supervision and returned to school with his 3 older brothers. He grabbed Hermione breathlessly. Please tell me, who were those amazing chess pieces? They've got unique killing moves, the sword energy from the king, the glowing moon from the queen. My whole Christmas was spent on them." Hermione smiled and pursed her lips. The transfigurations she'd used on the chess pieces had been modest. Just a little sound and light, a trick-level transfiguration that a second year would pick up easily. But giving the king the golden sword energy and letting the queen transform into a full moon had given the schoolboys a glimpse of the Forbidden Land's marvels. George and Fred came over too, grinning and fawning. "Hey Hermione, our relationship is good, right? George said with mock affection. We're your good friends, little Ronnie's big brothers, Fred added. So what do two brothers have to do for you to get another set of those chess pieces? George asked. How about some nosebleed nougat? Fred suggested. Hermione isn't that kind of girl. She never skips class, Ron protested. Right, how about some dung bombs? You could use them to teach Malfoy a lesson. Pestered by the twins' antics, Hermione gave in and promised to make them a set like Ron's. No, an ultimate, shining, limited edition set that would outdo Ron's, on the condition that they lend her their third-year textbooks. She had already finished Cedric's second-year books and returned them over the holiday. She couldn't just borrow third-year books when others were using them. The Weasley twins, however, all being in Gryffindor, could leave the books in the common room and hand them off at different times without trouble. Classes resumed, and Hermione set herself a strict list of tasks. Study textbooks ahead of schedule, spend extra time in the library, summarize and systematize Shining Stone magic for future papers, practice gravity magic. She still couldn't understand the joy of broom riding, work on sensory magic to expand her sky eye ability, research perfumery techniques, cultivate white phosphorus flowers, and more. Even though the Shining Stone magic paper was finished, her days were full. After term started, Harry, Ron, and Neville formed a boys' adventure squad and went out at night under the invisibility cloak. Neville, who had been shy and quiet when he first arrived, showed signs of the careful, well-bred education he'd received at home now that his health had improved. He wasn't as precocious as Hermione, but he was steady and capable. Professor Potter had often described him as the other child. In herbology and potions, he displayed painstaking attention to detail. And in the first practical of reversal of anti-wizard techniques after the holiday, when he had no wand and clutched an iron short sword instead, he charged forward with such ferocious determination, ignoring spell work and hacking at targets, that several classmates were genuinely startled. Hermione thought Professor Lily expected too much of Harry. From the point of view of other professors, among Gryffindor's 4 first years, it was only Ron who was slightly ordinary. The other 3 were at least very good. Harry's potion and practical scores lagged only behind Hermione's and were on par with Draco's. He frequently received praise in charms and herbology. Even Quirrell in history of magic and Firenze in astronomy occasionally agreed with views Harry put forward in his assignments. And even Ron, despite seeming the most ordinary, was above average for his year. After all, his borrowed, top-quality assignments helped raise him by osmosis. Hermione also thought Harry might simply not have applied himself yet. He showed cleverness when they played wizard chess. One more thing Hermione noticed since Christmas. Draco had been deliberately avoiding her. Ever since she'd received his gift, the boy had behaved as if his tail were on fire whenever she came near, leaving before she could thank him or return an equivalent present, even going out of his way to avoid sharing classes. She found his skittishness more amusing than annoying. That evening, Hermione had just finished her studies, washed up, and was getting ready for bed when her sky eye pinged. It wasn't the usual bell or a flurry of ghostly images this time. It flashed a single, sharp vision. The dark ceiling above her dissolved into chaotic color, resolving into a new scene, a surging tide of blue energy converging into a single mass, then rippling outward in pulsing waves. The humming light bathed everything in a brilliant azure. "Wait, is that Shining Stone magic?" she whispered. The image vanished as quickly as it had come, but the scent of Shining Stone lingered in her head, like ozone after lightning. That smell, faint but unmistakable, seemed to pervade the school. Hermione frowned. Professors had started experimenting with Shining Stone magic since her thesis, and interest had spread fast, but nothing she knew of should be emitting power like that. By every measurement she had, she ought to be the premier practitioner of Shining Stone magic in this world. The Tarnished had broken down and integrated 3 origin-level spells into her memory. In the Forbidden Land, she would scoff at wearing a twin sage hood. Yet the aura she was seeing now was almost comparable to Teacher Selin at her perfected stage. Stable and immense, a wild radiance that looked as if it might explode, turning whoever wielded it into a human-headed stone orb. Could a professor's experiment have gone wrong? Since her thesis, Most of the faculty had been exchanging ideas and developing ways to control radiation with magic. They'd become adept enough to call down starlight with a thought. Radiation levels inside Hogwarts had plummeted. Where it used to be a struggle to condense even half a shining stone pebble, now starlight sometimes flickered into being on its own. The promise of shining stone magic was precisely that, to take chaotic, disordered radiation and shape it into something controllable. If it worked, it might be used to clean up nuclear wastelands. Hermione's next thesis phase hadn't even begun. She was still trying to replicate more advanced forbidden land spells here. Whoever was channeling this power, if it was dangerous, could compromise her work, or worse, justify a ban on shining stone magic at Hogwarts. She couldn't sleep on it. She quietly dressed again and slipped out. She'd meant to borrow Harry's invisibility cloak, but the other 3 first-year boys had already sneaked out for a night stroll, taking it with them, so she had to rely on herself. "Become invisible," she whispered. A smoke-like spell washed over her. It was a Nochronic night charm, the kind used by Carrion royal family assassins, shadow magic from the eternal city beneath the Forbidden Land. Paired with an invisibility blade and swift, dim night pebbles, it could make a lethal, unseen killer. She'd never used that full arsenal here, but the disillusionment charm she knew drew on a different system. Tonight, it rendered her utterly absent in the mirror. If she could add an assassin's gate to erase sound and a darkness incantation to thicken the veil, the effect would be perfect. But those roundtable hold techniques required faith in the 2 fingers, faith she had abandoned. Faith-based magic like Spirit Flame or the Black Flame of Godslayer had other origins and couldn't be replicated without their deities or cults. Fortunately, a simple levitation charm on her boots lightened her step enough to reduce noise. She moved through the dark corridor like a ghost. This was the first time she'd slipped out alone at night. She felt oddly liberated. No cloak to keep in check, no constant worry it would slip. The school at night felt quieter than usual. There were no patrolling footsteps in the distance. The sky eye kept feeding her ripples of shining stone fluctuation, like a lighthouse guiding her steps. The trail led to the restricted area beyond the 4th-floor corridor. Hermione froze. From beyond the heavy door came a slow scraping sound, the heavy, shuffling movement of some enormous creature. Aragog. She crouched to peer through the crack and saw small spiders threading through it, the same kind she'd seen at Hagrid's. They scuttled in and out like ants. Were the professors collecting radiation energy? It wasn't impossible. Long before she came to this world, wizards had crude methods for dealing with radiation, suppressing a reactor's output with giant containment magics, for example. But controlling and reshaping radiation into stable forms was new. Maybe the spiders were a product of this research, either mutated by radiation or cultivated by the Care of Magical Creatures department as living probes to siphon stray energy. The night was quiet and, puzzlingly, not chaotic. This didn't feel like a runaway disaster. It felt like adults doing something big, deliberately. They understood radiation's dangers better than she did. There was no need to rush in blindly. She began to turn back toward the dormitory, to pretend she had never left her bed and go to sleep, when a faint sound made her stop near the statue of the one-eyed witch on the same floor. The stone split cleanly down the middle, revealing a dark opening. Hermione froze and watched, invisible and silent. The opening breathed for a moment and then closed again. She extended her silver-white staff and, with the tip, parted the air as if prying at water. A cloak of liquid shadow slid aside, and 3 small figures slipped through. Harry, Ron, and Neville. Clearly they'd gone to see Hagrid. They stood beneath the statue with wide, stunned faces, as if something had vanished from the world above them. The next moment, a dark shape took form beside them. Ron turned pale and was about to cry out before Harry and Neville clapped hands over his mouth. "You 3 took a walk at night again?" Hermione said, her tone sharp despite the situation. "If Professor Potter finds you, he might hex you into a Cerberus." Harry spun, then stammered. "Hermione, you came out alone? You can do the disillusionment charm?" He cut himself off and blurted, voice urgent. "Never mind that. Listen, you don't know what we saw. Hagrid's gone. The hut where he was recovering, it's just a huge pit." Hermione's hand tightened on the staff. "Quick, show me." Chapter 45. Walking into a Trap. Although nothing in the world of magic was supposed to be worth making a fuss over, it was still disconcerting that a person and a cave that had been perfectly fine yesterday had vanished entirely. Hermione followed the others down into the dark. One small comfort: for the sake of the group's illumination, Harry had already mastered the wand lighting charm, so they didn't have to carry lamps for their nocturnal explorations when Hermione wasn't around. I swear we didn't have mushroom soup for dinner, and the house elves wouldn't give us poisonous mushrooms to eat. It really turned into a big pit. We even jumped down to try it. Ron swore loudly, afraid Hermione wouldn't believe them. Even Fang is gone. Something serious must have happened. Hagrid's cave wasn't tiny. It was about half the size of a charms classroom. 10 or so students throwing spells around wouldn't feel crowded. Because of Hagrid's bulk and the chaotic piles of objects, however, it could feel a little cramped. That wasn't the whole cave, though. Behind the stone pillar Hagrid often leaned on, there was an abandoned tunnel that had once led to Hogsmeade. The far end of that path had been sealed off, so they had never gone further. According to Harry and the others, the central part of the cave had now collapsed completely, as if a large section of ground had been hollowed out, leaving the pillar Hagrid leaned on dangling like a stalactite. Hermione's mind filled with questions. Why was Hagrid recuperating in a dark underground cave instead of the hospital wing? Why did he disappear on the same night a powerful fluctuation of Philosopher's Stone energy was detected at the school? Were the spider's attraction to that energy connected? The cave was close to the surface. If you mapped it to the grounds, you could walk from the front to the back of the castle. Hogwarts, this massive moving castle, had an even larger underground portion than above ground. If it were all converted into subterranean structures, combined with wizarding magic, it might hold the population of a small city. Lost in thought, they soon reached the pit. Where there had been light before, now there was only pitch black. If Neville hadn't grabbed me back, I might have stepped right in. Ron started, then suddenly went quiet. The others froze too, because at the end of the corridor, two figures stood in the darkness, as if waiting for them. Harry's wand lighting charm remained lit, revealing the faces of the Watchers, Professor McGonagall and Professor Potter, who stood silently, watching the four of them descend like fawns being led into a trap. Oh! Harry's groan died in his throat. They hadn't bothered with an invisibility cloak on the way here, and even if they had, Ron's booming voice could have woken the gargoyles on the 8th floor. Are we seeing ghosts? It was fine when we came over. Where did the professors come from? Ron hissed, clenching his teeth. Hermione, however, kept her composure. She knew the professors weren't there just to catch them. Only Neville's face had gone ashen. He'd been at Hogwarts for barely any time and didn't know the staff well. He was terrified McGonagall might expel him if she was angry. Professor, Hermione said before anyone else could, stepping forward. The pit was indeed as deep as Harry had said. It looked as if she wouldn't be able to climb out by herself if she jumped in. It was as if a powerful spell had scooped out that part of the ground, or else a very clever transfiguration had made the stones walk away. All right, Hermione. Dumbledore wants to see you. McGonagall's expression was not harsh. She gave a small nod, inviting Hermione closer. As for the rest of you, Professor Potter uncrossed his arms, waved his wand, and an invisible charm lifted the three by their ears. Come with me, 15 points from each house, and a week of detention in potions. As the trio was dragged off, screaming, Hermione obediently looked to McGonagall. Professor, how do we get there? McGonagall waved her wand, and a path of earth and stone rose from the pit, linking to the central pillar. Like this. Put your hand on the pillar. Hermione obeyed. For a second it felt as if something hooked her at the stomach. Her feet left the ground and she spun through the air. Thanks to her excellent balance, she didn't feel sick, but the swirling oil paint-like colors before her eyes were unpleasant. The motion lasted only moments. Soon they landed lightly on a stone floor, and their surroundings had changed. That's a portkey. You'll learn how to make them later, McGonagall said. Hermione looked around. They were in a spacious chamber with no windows. Stone walls encircled the room. At their base circled a raised bed of earth planted with dozens of dangerous-looking plants. She could only name a few, dangerous species Professor Sprout had warned them about. She even recognized the mutilated devil's snare she had given the professor at Christmas. It had multiplied into a dense, thrashing tangle. Arrayed before the plants were many stone statues, knights, bishops, kings, chariots, like the pieces of a giant wizard chess set, standing in silent vigil on either side of the hall. In the center stood another stone pillar, the inverse of the one in Hagrid's cave, broader at its base, tapering toward the top like a display stand. On its platform, a stone that radiated a powerful, familiar energy hovered in midair. Dumbledore's phoenix perched on a nearby stand, staring blankly at the stone. This must be behind that door on the 4th floor, Hermione thought. Perhaps a giant acromantula guards it beyond the hall, she added inwardly. The phoenix turned its head and spoke with an apologetic tone. Ah, pardon an old bird's caprice, inviting you here when you should be sleeping. It's just that we're not certain this method will stabilize it. It looked at the hovering stone. Besides, you are curious about it, no? Hermione met McGonagall's encouraging glance and stepped forward to study the crystal that could lay waste to the whole school. Professor, can you tell me what this is? Theory on the nature of such stones had been published less than a month ago. If Hogwarts magic was already capable of producing stones like this, the wizarding world might never have reached the brink of apocalypse. It might have been pulverized by its own wars long ago. This is the source of Hogwarts' power, and the reason the castle began to migrate, McGonagall said quietly as she moved closer. She gazed at the azure stone. During the war between wizards and Muggles, Hogwarts, being the largest magic school in Europe, was not spared by the Muggles. They found Hogwarts' precise location with the help of goblins and dropped the largest yield bomb, Dumbledore said with a bitter smile, taking over the explanation. At that time, I was gravely wounded after my battle with Grindelwald and had no choice but to rely on the Philosopher's Stone left by Nicholas Flamel to prolong my life. So the Philosopher's Stone wasn't destroyed with Nicholas Flamel in the fire in Paris, Hermione thought, replaying what Harry had told her earlier. If she hadn't been there, even if Flamel had been defeated, with the stone he wouldn't have died that night. Dumbledore's face grew graver. Don't say that, Professor McGonagall said gently to Hermione. He knew the stone would be more valuable in capable hands. That's why he left it to you before he went. Without that stone, there would be no Hogwarts today, McGonagall added quietly. The wizarding world in Europe would have collapsed 50 years ago. Dumbledore took over, his voice heavy with age and regret. Yes, the blast was like a nuclear bomb over Hogwarts. The concealment and protective enchantments were ripped apart. I used the Philosopher's Stone, together with the magic left by the 4 founders, to absorb and contain the force of that explosion within the stone. Hermione pictured it. Dumbledore, wounded and desperate, steering the castle through an apocalypse and using everything at his disposal to stop it. The castle's own power and the stone had done most of the work, but even so, the scene was beyond imagination. But the stone wasn't meant to store that kind of energy, she murmured. Nuclear power is too violent and unstable. You must have changed the stone's nature completely, turned it into a kind of magical nuclear bomb, full of radiation and ready to go off at any moment. A cold sweat prickled down her spine. Hogwarts had been traveling for 50 years, carrying a potential nuclear explosion. Why didn't you just get rid of it? She asked. Dump it in an uninhabited ocean. If it exploded there, it wouldn't hurt anyone. Because it fused with the Founder's magic and with Hogwarts itself, McGonagall explained. If you removed it, Hogwarts would lose that original magic. The school could collapse, or worse, the protective bond Hogwarts forms with its students might fail or backfire. The castle would then search automatically for new sources of magic and end up draining every student bound by the Covenant. That's the worst-case scenario, Dumbledore said. Hermione understood at once. When children finish the sorting and become part of Hogwarts, they implicitly sign a magical contract. Hogwarts provides them with a measure of protection, limited but real. Tear away the stone and the castle's enchantments could unravel catastrophically. The image that rose in her mind was of a hot potato no one could throw away. The Philosopher's Stone, the Founder's magic, and the enormous stored blast energy all fused into a single terrifying whole. The only choice was to keep carrying it and manage it as best they could. "You maintained it, with your magic, for 50 years," Hermione asked in disbelief. Dumbledore tried to lighten his tone. "We were fortunate. When none of us understood radiation, Merlin stood with us. Perhaps a little luck, a few fortunate potions. In any case, we managed it until you arrived." McGonagall elaborated. "We kept Hogwarts moving constantly. In part, that used up some of the excess energy and helped stabilize the internal balance. Over the years, we learned more about radiation and even began to use Hogwarts to absorb other sources." "Like Chernobyl," Hermione said, the pieces clicking into place. "You used Hogwarts to absorb the nuclear waste leaked from Chernobyl, besides the sorting and wand selection for first years." "Yes," McGonagall said. "When we learned you had completed your thesis on Shining Stone magic, we hoped to use your theory to transform the stone, turn it into a pure, controllable Philosopher's Stone." She looked toward the stone itself, a neat shard of radiance sitting amid the professor's careful wards. Hermione stepped closer and reached out with the same Shining Stone magic she had developed, letting her senses glide over its structure. The outer layer showed the pure Shining Stone architecture she knew. Under Flamel's influence, Dumbledore's talents, and the Founder's wards, the stone had been reshaped in ways both ingenious and baffling. "The outer structure is a little different from what I expected," she said, more to herself than to them. "Perhaps this adjustment will help." She couldn't claim the inner workings of the stone or the Founder's ancient magics as her own. They were too complex, but she could read and tweak the Shining Stone framework on the outside. Her knowledge of the primeval current and the Forbidden Lands research, how to convert organic and inorganic matter, gave her the tools to help. "I don't fully understand the stone's operating principles or the Founder's magic," she admitted. "The internal structure is too complex for me to unravel quickly. I'll need time, but I can ensure its short-term stability." Dumbledore's eyes were bright with relief. "Of course, child. That's precisely why I sought you out. You have an innate talent for Shining Stone magic. You may be better suited than any of us to keep it steady." Hermione hesitated, then raised her wand. The Shining Stone residue on it was nearly gone. Powerful Shining Stone wizards could one day detach themselves from dependence on a physical stone. After all, a starfall couldn't draw its power from a little stone embedded in a staff. A physical stone eventually becomes more of a catalyst, a focus. But Hermione was not there yet. She needed some external Shining Stone energy. "May I use a little of the stone's energy, just to recharge my wand?" she asked. "Take what you deserve," Dumbledore said with a smile. Relief and joy blossomed inside her. Her comet azure could not be sated. She touched her wand to the stone and drew a small, steady stream of light into it. It was enough. "I will diligently maintain this stone," she promised. "I swear it." McGonagall ruffled her hair. "You've done enough for Hogwarts tonight. Now it's time to go to bed." Hermione nodded, then remembered to ask, "Where's Hagrid? Is he and Aragog guarding the stone outside?" "Yes," McGonagall replied. "Tonight is crucial for the stone's reconstruction. We cannot risk any accidents." "Did the Green Flame Party come to seize the stone?" Hermione asked, the other mysteries falling into place. An unstable Philosopher's Stone was an irresistible prize. "Even an unstable stone is a powerful and coveted energy source," Dumbledore said. "It's natural for Voldemort to try to take it. In truth, many groups have inquired, overtly and covertly, about the power that has kept Hogwarts moving for 50 years. No one's transfiguration is that strong." "It's not that others haven't tried to recreate something like this," McGonagall said with a touch of pride, "but they failed. Hogwarts remains the best." Hermione glanced once more at the stone, drew a tiny extra trace of energy into her wand, then followed McGonagall back to the common room, feeling both the weight of what she'd learned and the fierce determination to protect it. When Hermione walked into the common room, she found 3 dejected boys huddled together, clearly having been severely reprimanded by Professor Potter. At the sight of her, they hurried over and pressed close. "Dumbledore didn't expel you, did he?" Ron blurted. "It's our fault," Harry said, eyes full of remorse. "If we hadn't insisted on dragging you along, if we hadn't made you use that disillusionment charm." Hermione couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. Even punished, she could see how worried they were for her. Should she say that the families clustered around the White Wizard had done a good job raising their children? "I'm fine," she said. "Dumbledore called me for something else." She kept the Philosopher's Stone to herself. That was a Hogwarts secret. Their parents would tell them when they were old enough. Ron exhaled in relief. "Thank goodness. Our parents are all in the order. Usually a scolding is the worst we get. If you'd been expelled. But it was late. Why did Dumbledore want to see you? Is it about Hagrid?" Harry asked, curiosity pushing past his worry. Neville, from the side, offered, "Professor Potter told us not to go looking for him anymore. He said Hagrid's recovered from his injuries and is going to work for Dumbledore." "Dumbledore talked to me about Shining Stone magic," Hermione said. "Hagrid's all right. I asked the professor about him." Her thoughts, however, were elsewhere. Dumbledore had eased some of her questions tonight, but many mysteries remained. Where were the ghosts? By the Philosopher's Stone, she had neither seen spectral guardians nor felt any hidden deathly aura, which meant, at least tonight, the ghosts weren't on the fourth floor. Why had Hagrid dug in the first place if he was no longer injured? And why, at such a critical moment for Hogwarts, had Dumbledore still sent a phoenix to appear? It was odd. She hadn't pressed McGonagall for answers. She could tell the professors carried things they did not want to say, a great weight pressing on their hearts. It was wiser to wait. When she showed enough talent, she would be brought into the center of things and understand the rest. "Speaking of which, Hermione, can you teach us Shining Stone magic?" Harry asked, admiration plain in his voice. "Your paper is too deep for us. We've been poring over it and still don't get it." Ron complained. Neville, it was clear, was simply struggling to keep up. Hermione looked at them, surprised. These three, who spent their days plotting adventures, were suddenly eager to improve. Seeing the bright longing in Harry's eyes made her understand. Talent and strength were the tools of glory to a young boy, being noticed, being the one bathed in praise, the hero in everyone's story. Harry, especially, had grown up with comparisons and quiet rebukes. Hermione's brilliance was exactly the thing he'd dreamed of becoming. Maybe, he thought, if he learned Shining Stone magic, he could be dazzling too. Her thesis, composed with Flitwick's guidance and a maturity beyond their years, was still too abstruse for 11-year-olds. "Of course you can learn," Hermione said with a laugh. "But it isn't easy. Do you really mean it? You'll have less time for night walking." "Don't remind me," Harry groaned. "They only gave Ron and Neville a week of potions detention, but I have a month." Professor Potter hadn't confiscated Harry's invisibility cloak, but he had taken other ways of curbing him. Hermione only smiled. She was already thinking how to teach them. A one-size-fits-all lesson in Shining Stone basics wouldn't do. Harry, headfirst and fearless, would do well learning the weapon magic of the Cuckoo Knights, spells that amplify the force of a flail. Ron and Neville would need different approaches. She'd watch them and choose spells suited to each temperament. Elsewhere in Hogwarts, Minerva McGonagall left the common room and made her way to the headmaster's office. The portraits of former headmasters were asleep, candlelight low. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, mostly hidden in the dim, his long beard and half-moon spectacles catching the light. The phoenix on its perch dozed, a few feathers drifting down. "Albus, I still think we're being rash," McGonagall said bluntly. "She's only a first year. The Philosopher's Stone is too dangerous. Even with all of us, we must be careful, and you want to place such a burden on a child who's only recently left the Muggle world?" Under the wavering candlelight, the stern deputy headmistress appeared suddenly small and worried. She was not young. The years had left their marks. The mirror behind her caught the candle's glow, her slight stoop, and Dumbledore's lined face. Dumbledore tilted his head, then offered her a sherbet. "Now, Minerva, you worry too much. This school has been putting pressure on you for years." He pinched a candy and handed it over. "Don't try to carry everything yourself. I'm still here, and you must learn to trust your students." We watched her from the moment she arrived. We all saw the way she took to Shining Stone magic. Didn't we decide this together? She is the most remarkable student I have ever seen. You've said it yourself. I believe in her. You should too. McGonagall accepted the candy, and let the sweetness thaw some of the tension in her chest. I just worry, Albus. We don't have do-overs. Once we make a choice. You mean Tom, Dumbledore murmured. He took the wrong path. That's on me. I failed to guide him better. I didn't mean to accuse you, McGonagall said quickly. I only think we should be cautious. Wait until she's older, at least. Dumbledore's smile was patient. But Tom won't give us time, will he? The green flame party that lurked in the castle had been quiet lately, but that did not mean they had forgotten. McGonagall drew a breath. We could root him out now. We've the means, so why not? Because the moment is not right, Dumbledore said softly. Even in urgency, we must have patience. A faint light showed in his cloudy eyes, as if every move lay within a careful plan only he could see. 48. Nesting January slipped away beneath howling winds. That month, Harry and his friends made a rare effort. Between classes, detentions, and Hermione's tutoring, they all pushed themselves. Professor Potter had noticed his son changing and was quietly pleased with the current Harry, and increasingly grateful to Hermione for the role she'd played in his growth. In the study of Shining Stone magic, Harry's progress was promising. He could now strengthen his flail with magic, though keeping the enchantment required most of his attention, still far from practical in real combat. By Hermione's standards, he needed to be able to do tactical rolls, anticipate an opponent's moves, maintain the strengthening spell while using combat skills, and eventually cast with his free hand as well. There was still a long way to go in his training. Ron and Neville took different paths. Ron gave up after a while. He wasn't cut out for direct, close-quarters fighting. He preferred to use his brain from a safer distance, which suited him perfectly in wizard's chess. When he commanded pieces, he planned carefully and had a knack for seizing openings. For some reason, though, the strategies he could invent during games never translated to physical sparring. That didn't mean he lacked courage. No Gryffindor was cowardly, but everyone had their own strengths. Hermione decided to teach him the basic Shining Stone pebbles first, so he'd have a foundation. Ron was intrigued by the spell that had almost killed Draco, and he was motivated to learn. Neville, regretfully, asked to postpone. He was barely keeping up with the professor's coursework and wanted time to catch up with his classmates' curriculum. Hermione supported him and promised extra tutoring in her free moments. Her schedule, already tight, became tighter. In addition to her regular lessons and tutoring, she often went after curfew to the hall behind the 4th floor to research and stabilize the Philosopher's Stone. Professor McGonagall would not let her use the main door on the 4th floor corridor, too obvious a trap for infiltrators. So Hermione used the old route, the tunnel behind the statue of the one-eyed witch, down into the cave, and from there the key pillar took her to the hall. Fortunately, the pit in the cave had been filled, so she no longer had to transfigure a path each time. Sometimes McGonagall accompanied her, sometimes Dumbledore's Phoenix, sometimes Flitwick or other professors. Each of them explained their understanding of the Philosopher's Stone and the magic of the Founders from their own perspectives, never forcing an interpretation on Hermione, but hoping she would combine those views with her own theories and innovate. Hermione soaked up their knowledge like a sponge and gradually eliminated hidden instabilities in the stone. The beautiful blue gem grew steadier. She believed that even if a bomb detonated in the hall now, its core would remain unaffected. Hogwarts settled into a period of relative calm. The rescued new students, after a month of adjustment, had largely integrated into campus life. Except for Seamus Finnegan. No one could say what Seamus had lived through before coming to school, but he had an obsessive fascination with explosions. 5 times he had produced thunderous detonations in class, much to Professor Flitwick's fury. The little charms master stomped his feet and demanded, "How can Ravenclaw have a student like you? You should have been sorted into Gryffindor." Even Hermione thought Seamus might belong in Gryffindor, but the Sorting Hat's decision could not be changed. Seamus explained that at the time the Hat had put him on his head, he'd been thinking only about explosions, so the Hat had respected that and put him in Ravenclaw, curiosity and the pursuit of knowledge, after all. Seamus said his father used to take him to visit war relics as a child. Shell craters, spent casings, distant Muggle skirmishes. Those sights kindled his fascination with explosions. His mother told him magic could lead to other things, but explosions stayed in his heart. The Sorting Hat had hesitated for nearly a minute and then obeyed the child's true desire. Hogwarts continued its unhurried journey and had now reached the Mediterranean coast, though the castle was heavy and could only operate near shore. Further out, the sea might not support it. From the wind, Hermione guessed they were moving west, but she wasn't sure exactly where. She only hoped spring would arrive soon, so the storms would stop and the land could show a little of its tired life. That evening, Hermione went to the fourth-floor hall as usual, accompanied by Professor McGonagall. While Hermione was absorbed in her work, McGonagall said suddenly, "We've decided to announce to the outside world that the Philosopher's Stone has been stabilized." Hermione looked up, surprised. "Won't that make outside forces greedier?" McGonagall answered gravely, "The wizarding world needs a boost of confidence. Pressure from goblins and muggles is growing every day. A secure, strong rear will make wizards more willing to believe in the future of our world." Hermione considered this for a moment. "And to draw out the Green Flame party hiding in the school? I suspect it's Lucius," McGonagall admitted. Hermione raised an eyebrow. She had guessed the true purpose, but not necessarily the culprit. McGonagall smiled, slightly surprised. "Dumbledore said you'd understand the motive, but I didn't expect you to name the likely culprit." "It wasn't difficult," Hermione said. "Of all the professors who have joined me these past weeks, only this Dean of Slytherin hasn't shown up. That exclusion seems obvious." McGonagall shook her head. "He helped arrange protection for the Philosopher's Stone, but he doesn't even know you exist. Only when we announce the stone's stabilization will he realize he's been kept out of the loop." "The nominal owner of Malfoy Manor actually cooperating with the Green Flame party," Hermione said. "What could Lord Voldemort have offered him?" "Fame and fortune, opportunities for advancement," McGonagall said. "But Dumbledore has offered him chances too. If Lucius can step back, we'll all pretend we never knew." "Why not just arrest him?" Hermione pressed. "We can't simply break ties with the nobility," McGonagall replied with a look of helplessness. "Hogwarts needs support. Food, clothing, textbooks, potion ingredients. We're still a school. A castle can't be completely self-sufficient. Without evidence against a dean, the head of Malfoy Manor, and one of Hogwarts' governors, acting would leave the school helpless." "And now? We'll catch him red-handed," McGonagall said firmly. "The stabilization of the stone gives us leverage. The other nobles connected to Malfoy Manor will not abandon the chance to befriend Hogwarts just because their head is treacherous." Hermione understood. Before, Hogwarts had been walking a tightrope with a bomb, seemingly dependent on Malfoy Manor, which had the real upper hand. Without Hogwarts, they could turn to Beauxbatons or Durmstrang. If Hogwarts lost Malfoy Manor, the school might face shortages and the specter of the stone's destruction. Now, with the Philosopher's Stone stable, Hogwarts had become a coveted asset. Many would attempt to replicate its magic source technology, even at great cost. If Malfoy Manor cut ties, Dumbledore could take the technology elsewhere. Asia, Africa, America. There were other powers willing to accept them. "What do you need me to do?" Hermione asked. "The professors have arranged most of it," McGonagall said, then hesitated. "This part is a personal wish of mine. We hadn't intended to involve a child, but if things go wrong, I want you to take the Philosopher's Stone and hide it. As long as it's inside the school, Hogwarts will not lose its magic source. Come through the one-eyed witch's secret passage, take the stone and run. If Lucius can't find you, he will fail." Hermione listened and nodded, understanding the weight of what McGonagall asked. The castle around them creaked softly, as if eavesdropping on their resolve. 49. The current situation of decline. At the top of Hogwarts Castle, a soft, azure light cut through the gloom and washed the surrounding sky. Ever since Professor McGonagall's conversation that night, Hogwarts had made the Philosopher's Stone public knowledge. In an instant, though it wasn't a holiday, wizards flooded in from every direction. The official statement credited Hermione, a natural stone magic prodigy, with stabilizing the Philosopher's Stone and presented her as the school's key authority on the matter. Adults treated the announcement with practical detachment. Hogwarts had found a student they could study and display. For Hermione, the upside was clear. her papers would get far more attention, and the increased readership could mean better royalties on her next article. The students, as students will, turned the stone into legend. They argued about how it worked, pictured Dumbledore wielding it like a death ray to slay the Dark Lord, imagined it crushing goblin uprisings and subduing deranged Muggles, and saw it as the seed of a new world order. In truth, Dumbledore had only set the beacon atop Hogwarts to an azure hue. It was not radioactive, merely pure light with a faint warmth, a public signal that said, "We're not hiding this. We're going to use the Philosopher's Stone as our power source." The walking castle no longer trembled as it had. Instead, it radiated a composed, regal strength. Thanks to Hermione, the Philosopher's Stone was now able to absorb ambient radiation to augment its energy, leaving a noticeable drop in radiation in the paths through which Hogwarts moved. On a global scale, this change was small, but it drove outside powers frantic. What the students did not grasp was how stabilizing the stone had turned Hogwarts itself more formidable. The mobile castle could now be treated almost like a moving fortress, capable, if it wished, of unleashing devastating saturation offensives using the stone's immense energy. Of course, a school devoted to peace and carrying the hopes of the European wizarding world would not act on that capability. As major powers sent envoys and representatives, the school grew chaotic. The recent Christmas scene seemed on the verge of repeating. None of that concerned Hermione. She kept to her own schedule. She disagreed with McGonagall's choice to go public, not because she objected to telling the world, but because she disliked McGonagall's handling of the personal arrangements. McGonagall's caution was the chess player's move of accepting defeat before the fight to secure a strategic advantage. Hermione preferred to face the enemy without losing heart. Still, she would carry out the professor's orders conscientiously. Lucius, that conspicuous spy, became distractingly absent-minded after learning the stone had been stabilized. He nearly pulled the pin on a Muggle fragmentation grenade during one of his demonstrations in defense against the dark arts, and afterwards he grew anxious and irritable. His heavy footsteps and angry mutterings could be heard outside his classroom. Falling house scores across the board were often blamed on him. Even Slytherin wasn't spared. He took to seclusion, stopped dining at the staff table in the Great Hall, and hurried the corridors wrapped in his black robe. The other professors treated him like air, interacting only when necessary for administration. Even Flitwick kept only a polite distance. "Did you hear? Draco's dropping out," someone called in the common room. Hermione, who had just traded a freshly made wizard chess set to the Weasley twins for third-year textbooks, heard the news and looked up. "Dropping out? What?" Ron exploded. "Has he gone mad? Is old Malfoy sending him to Durmstrang?" "Durmstrang? Isn't that the Wizengamot's private reserve? Is Malfoy signing him up for the army?" Harry asked. Hermione was not surprised. Of the three major European wizarding schools, Durmstrang had long been notorious for its teachings on the dark arts and had been the alma mater of the Dark Lord Grindelwald. After Grindelwald overran Paris and defeated Dumbledore, Durmstrang fell into the Wizengamot's orbit and became a recruiting ground. It had once excluded Muggle-borns. Under the Wizengamot, it no longer discriminated, and all recruits were put through militarized management and ideological conditioning. Graduates were disciplined, warlike, and often fanatically devoted to the Dark Lord, a prospect many pureblood families found repellent. In their view, a child sent to Durmstrang might as well lose the family name and become a servant of a so-called greater good. Beauxbatons, by contrast, had ties to Nicholas Flamel. After the Dark Lord killed Flamel, it could not side with the Wizengamot, but it lacked the power to resist. The school evolved into a specialized alchemy institute, gathering Flamel's legacy and building large alchemical workshops that produced implements for wizards, goblins, and even muggles, at different prices, naturally. Beauxbatons accepted students from diverse backgrounds and turned out top alchemists, but the training was dangerous. Explosions and forbidden experiments claimed lives every year. The school was small but wealthy, and it maintained the best relations with goblins and muggles. It hated Grindelwald's followers with a quiet, irreconcilable intensity. Hogwarts, which still wandered across Europe, remained the default choice for many pure blood and wizarding families. Even after half a century of carrying what many called a bomb, it still seemed preferable to the alternatives. At least, it hadn't exploded. It boasted the most powerful white wizard, the only one who had even come close to contending with Grindelwald, and it preserved the most complete traditions of wizarding education. In the minds of many wizards, Hogwarts was still top tier. Of course, a significant number of families chose to educate their children at home. In the post-war world, the erstwhile outcasts who had once been looked down on were now more common. While Slytherin admitted more pure-blood children than other houses, in recent years its numbers had remained small. Many families preferred ancestral portraits or house elves as tutors, safe if old-fashioned. "It can't be that old Malfoy is preparing to teach Draco personally, can it?" Ron said, his tone exaggerated. The others speculated, but Hermione heard another meaning in the rumor. It was a signal. Lucius was preparing to flee. Whether he had planned something larger or was running because his cover had been blown, he would not leave his son to someone else's care. Lucius was about to move. Hermione should warn the professors to prepare. No, they must already know. They would have known before her. 50. Stealing. In the days that followed, everyone at Hogwarts learned that Professor Malfoy intended to withdraw his son. It wasn't broadcast by Lucius himself. Draco never wanted to leave. Even with the fierce Miss Hermione Granger prowling the corridors, the castle was infinitely more appealing than the cold, gloomy manor with its ancestral portraits and downtrodden house elves. At Hogwarts, Draco could learn, play, and explore with friends. The school moved and changed, and even when the sights were bleak, they were better than being shut away in a sunlight-starved estate. Students saw father and son arguing more and more, in Lucius's office, in corridors, sometimes loudly enough for anyone passing to hear. Draco hadn't always dared defy his father, but when repeated pleas failed, he resorted to increasingly radical measures. Old Malfoy, however, would not be moved. He would sooner lose face in front of the whole school than change his mind. Rumor had it, Draco had even appealed to Professor McGonagall, but she had told him plainly that Hogwarts could not interfere with a parent's decision, especially when the parent was the Slytherin dean and a school governor. Withdrawing required Dumbledore's signature and termination of the student's contract, usually automatic at graduation or expulsion, but a midterm withdrawal was messy, and that left a sliver of hope for Draco. The professors were on edge. Once Draco was gone, Lucius would be free of school constraints, and whatever behind-the-scenes games were brewing could begin in earnest. Hermione had assumed none of this concerned her, until Daphne came to find her. Hermione was in the library, hunting for reference books for her homework, when the new Slytherin slipped up like a small, nervous mouse and tugged at her sleeve. Daphne had joined Slytherin partway through the year and still had trouble fitting in. Anyone caught conspiring with a Gryffindor would only be pushed further out. Hermione looked at her in surprise. Compared to the first months at school, Daphne seemed healthier now. She had regained the poised air of a pure-blood young lady, but she was still taught with caution. "Is something wrong?" Hermione asked. "It's Draco," Daphne whispered, swallowing. Hermione's name carried weight in Slytherin these days. She was the ruthless girl who had once come perilously close to cutting their dean in half. "He asked me to find you." "Draco?" Hermione frowned. "Isn't he being withdrawn? Why doesn't he come himself?" Daphne glanced down the stacks as if afraid someone might overhear, then eased behind a bookshelf and spoke in a conspiratorial hush. "He doesn't want to be withdrawn. The dean has him locked in the Slytherin common room, and older students are watching him. Someone's coming to pick him up tonight." "Then go to McGonagall or Dumbledore," Hermione said. "What good is finding me?" Daphne's eyes went wide. Professor McGonagall said she couldn't interfere with the Malfoys' family matters, but Draco knows about the Potter family's invisibility cloak. Hermione blinked. Draco knows about the Potter invisibility cloak. It occurred to her that family heirlooms were often common knowledge in pure-blood circles. So he wants to borrow Harry's cloak to escape. But he can't stay hidden under Harry's cloak forever. Daphne shook her head. He wants to hide in the castle first. As long as he isn't sent home, he has a chance to make the dean change his mind. Hermione wasn't convinced. They didn't know why Lucius wanted Draco withdrawn, and whatever the reason, Lucius's will was formidable. Still, Draco had sent Hermione a Christmas present, a box of very good pastries, and she'd decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. Besides, the cloak belonged to Harry. She couldn't lend it on her own, so she took Daphne to find the Gryffindor trio. They met in a corner of the library: Hermione, Harry, Ron, Daphne, and Neville. Daphne told the plan, and the five of them stared at one another. "He actually begged a Gryffindor?" Ron muttered. "That means he's desperate," Neville said after a moment. "If my parents wanted to withdraw me, I'd try everything to stay," Ron admitted with a rueful scratch of his head. "Though I don't much like the idea of helping Malfoy." "The cloak is yours, Harry," Hermione said bluntly. "Whether to help is up to you." Harry looked from Hermione to Daphne and back again. "Since you brought her to us, that means you want to help, Hermione?" he asked. She nodded. "Compared to old Malfoy, I don't think this little dragon is beyond redemption yet, and he did send me excellent pastries for Christmas." Harry smiled. "All right, I agree, but I won't let you take the cloak alone. I have to go with you to get him out." The spark of adventure was back in his eyes. Sneaking into the Slytherin common room under the cloak sounded like exactly the sort of thing Harry couldn't resist. "Hey, you can't leave us out," Ron objected. Neville, after a moment's hesitation, chimed in. "Can I come too?" Harry shook his head. "The cloak doesn't fit many people. If it's me, Hermione, and Draco, that's already 3. Any more would make us too conspicuous." Ron and Neville exchanged disappointed looks. Harry was the owner of the cloak. Hermione was the sensible essential to handle whatever went wrong. The other 2 would be liabilities inside the common room. "Then at least we can stand guard outside the Slytherin entrance," Ron offered. "Right?" Neville agreed. "We'll be the lookout." They quickly divided tasks. With the group in agreement, Daphne explained Draco's plan in more detail. "The person coming for him will arrive at dinner. We have to get him out of the common room before then, while the older students are on guard, and hide him in some empty classroom. The people sent to collect him will search and not find him, and then, if he isn't found, they'll leave. What if old Malfoy suspects and comes looking himself?" Harry asked. Daphne shrugged. "The dean has guests tonight. He'll be busy entertaining. That's why Draco picked tonight." "How are we getting into the Slytherin common room?" Hermione asked. Daphne had thought of that. "You wear the invisibility cloak and follow behind me. Stay right behind and don't let any Slytherin touch you." "What about the older students guarding him?" Harry prompted. Her look went to Hermione, who met it with a steady nod. "Leave that to me." 51. Shock. They were pressed for time, so no one hesitated. Everyone packed up and headed back to the dorms. By the time Harry and his friends met Daphne, who had the invisibility cloak, it was almost dinner time. "We need to hurry. We don't know how long it'll be before someone comes to collect Draco," Hermione said, sensing Daphne's nerves and urging everyone on. They slipped the cloak into place in a hidden alcove, Daphne going ahead to speak the password to open the Slytherin common room. Most students were already in the Great Hall, so the common room was nearly empty. "From now on, we can say we're Gryffindors who've been inside Slytherin," Harry said, excited. Ron and Neville crouched nearby, eager and grinning, watching them go in. The Slytherin common room was decorated in silver-green serpent motifs. Daphne carried a tray of pies and fries she'd fetched from the Great Hall to deliver to Draco and the others. Her palms were sweating. She couldn't see the invisible Hermione and Harry. She could only steady herself and walk down the long corridor until she reached a door. Taking a deep breath, she knocked. "It's me. I'm here with dinner." Footsteps came from inside. A tall man opened the door, muttering, "What took you so long? Come in." He stepped back into the room. "Magic weapon," Harry's slightly muffled voice said. A metal rod, faintly aglow with magic, flashed and struck the man hard on the back of the head. He collapsed. Harry had used the haft of a spiked flail, not the spiked head, so the blow wasn't fatal. Another man inside the room, sitting in a chair, froze at the fall of his companion and reached for the dagger-shaped short sword at his waist. Hermione's voice cut through the air, clear and sharp. "Stupefy." Hermione revealed herself. The invisibility spell she'd used wasn't as effective as the cloak. Attacks broke it, unlike the cloak, which hid Harry almost completely except for the exposed flail handle. The two older Slytherin men were down in an instant. Harry was still swinging the flail, ready for another blow. Daphne slammed the door shut and leaned against it, panting. Inside a luxurious bed, Draco rose, a mix of nervousness and excitement on his face. "Hermione, I knew you'd help me." "You should thank Harry," Hermione shrugged. "If not for the cloak, you wouldn't have gotten out either." Draco turned to Harry. "I owe you one." Harry shrugged nonchalantly. He didn't expect ever to need a favor from Draco. Besides saving Hermione's face, he mostly wanted a look at the Slytherin common room and to tick off a Gryffindor achievement. "All right, let's go. It's not safe yet." Hermione pushed Draco and Harry back under the cloak. "I'll wait in the common room, okay? You won't need me for the rest," Daphne said hesitantly. Hermione pointed to the two unconscious men. "How are you going to explain them to Mr. Malfoy?" Daphne, responsible for delivering the food, had no way to deny being there. The panic on her face was unmistakable. Once she'd stepped onto this ship, there was no getting off. "Same as before. Walk in front, we follow behind," Hermione said, reapplying her invisibility charm. The four slipped out of the dormitory and hurried away. Just as they reached the common room door, it swung open from the outside. Two adult men in black silk robes stood there. Ron and Neville clung to one of their robes, refusing to let go. "Who are you, and why can you just come and go from the Slytherin common room?" Ron demanded. "If you don't tell us, we'll call Dumbledore." Neville had his eyes shut, clutching the leg of the other man. "Two Gryffindors? What are you doing guarding the Slytherin entrance?" "We're from Malfoy Manor," one of the men said, frowning. "We're here to collect young Master Draco." He waved his wand, and an invisible force yanked the two boys aside. "How do you prove you're from Malfoy Manor?" Ron kept shouting, clinging stubbornly. The men exchanged an annoyed, amused look. "Red-haired boy, you're a Weasley, aren't you? This has nothing to do with you. Do you really think you can stop us?" The door opened, and Daphne stood there, dazed. The men spotted her immediately. "You're Miss Greengrass, aren't you? I think I've seen you before," one said. "You've gotten much thinner since that abduction. Why are you here?" Daphne's mind went blank. I was just delivering food to Draco and the others." Hermione, Harry, and Draco stood as still as they dared, watching from the doorway. If Daphne had looked in their direction and given them away, everything could have gone terribly wrong. Fortunately, the men didn't notice anything odd. "You're still as timid as ever, Miss Greengrass," one of them laughed. "Perfect. Young Master Draco has eaten, so we can depart." Daphne froze, but any hesitation would have been dangerous. If these men discovered the situation in the dormitory, they might not get away. Neville thought quickly. "Daphne, didn't you ask us to wait here and go to the library together?" She blinked, like someone waking from a dream. "Oh, right. I still have homework after I deliver the food." One man shot a glance at the two Gryffindors. "You'd do better to keep your distance from Gryffindors, miss. It's not good for you." With that, they turned toward the dormitory, and Hermione's trio slipped out of the common room at the same time, moving quickly while the men's attention was elsewhere. That was a thrill. Harry panted after they'd run a fair distance and collapsed into an empty, deserted classroom to catch their breath. He was breathless with excitement more than fear. This little foray had been just the kind of adventure he liked. Daphne sank to the floor. She was spent. Adrenaline and nerves had drained her completely. Ron and Neville stayed close, tugging at Harry for details about the Slytherin common room. Draco peered through a crack in the door to make sure nothing untoward was happening, then turned to the others. "Thanks, everyone. As long as I don't get expelled, then—" A deafening bang cut him off. Boom. Hermione ducked to the window and looked out. Through the barrier around Hogwarts, a great hole gaped, belching black smoke. Figures in black robes were pouring through. High above, a dense green cloud shaped into a skull and flicked a serpent's tongue at the castle. Green lightning rolled through the clouds with an ominous, unnatural light. On the ground, dark green fireballs streaked toward the barrier and slammed into it. "The Dark Mark! The Death Eaters!" Draco cried. "It's Lord Voldemort. He couldn't swallow the losses from before Christmas. Oh my God, he's attacking Hogwarts!" They stood stunned. In living memory, Hogwarts had never been openly attacked like this. Voldemort's previous intrusions had been covert. This was a full-on assault. The Death Eaters had come out in force. The dark green blasts struck Hogwarts' barrier, sending ripples through the protective field. Fortunately, the barrier did not split open, as it had a moment before. Severus Snape led the attackers like a black cloud, descending with the dark wizards through the breach and landing on the snow-whitened lawn. A biting wind rushed in behind them, stinging and cold. How warm, full of weak, detestable children, Bellatrix breathed, delirious, drawing the air in like a pleasure. Her skin was marked with terrifying dark green sigils, the after-effects of forbidden magic. Thin tendrils of black smoke drifted off her. Even the Death Eaters kept a wary distance. Snape said nothing. He stood wrapped in his black cloak, gloomy as a thunderhead, eyes fixed on the castle's main gate. Students who had been outside were screaming and running back in. A red-haired figure rushed out toward the intruders. Lily, fresh from dinner in the Great Hall and the first professor to arrive, hid none of her alarm. "Severus," she called, her face ice-cold. She drew her wand and fumbled for her potion pouch with the other hand. "All students, to the Great Hall. Stay there. Professors will be here." She braced for a fight. Snape alone was dangerous enough. Now a cohort of Green Flame elites had landed. She could not hold them off by herself, but Snape seemed in no hurry to duel. He hooked a finger, and a broken, black-robed figure tumbled through the air and collapsed at his feet. "He's your spy in the Green Flame party, isn't he?" Snape's voice was low and hard as winter water. "Mundungus." Lily recognized him instantly. Though badly battered and tortured, Mundungus's chest still rose and fell. "Hogwarts wards are stubborn. If not for this rat's link, we wouldn't have found this place for who knows how long," Snape said. "My Lord Voldemort will not forget the humiliation you gave him," he continued. "His humiliation is ours to avenge." Bellatrix smiled and drove the Cruciatus into Mundungus. He screamed. Lily stepped forward to intervene, but Snape blocked her. He flung his cloak open, and several oddly shaped grenades flew out and detonated between them. A dense, strange blue smoke erupted, pouring across the lawn. The wild turf blackened and withered where the mist touched it. Soil turned to slick black mud. Lily had no choice but to retreat. Snape was a master of potions as well as hexes. She could not risk that poison brushing her skin. She swept her wand and conjured a whipping gale to drive the miasma back, and with her other hand took a couple of draughts from her pouch. Snape answered with a stronger wind, his power clearly superior, and the two gales struck one another. The clash did not end in a single blow. Lily forced herself to breathe, exhaled sharply, and a white mist burst from her lips. It reacted with Snape's poison, neutralizing it into harmless vapor. "This is the first present from our Lord Voldemort," Bellatrix screamed, raising her wand and channeling a deathly green light at the helpless Mundungus. "Avada Kedavra!" Everyone flinched. The green beam flashed, and yet Mundungus did not die. He groaned and blinked in confusion. A small, lifeless mouse lay on his chest. Then the mouse vaporized into ash. A scrap of fabric at his collar had been turned to char, mimicking a corpse. McGonagall stood at the Great Hall gate, face stern. She wore the anti-Avada coat, Hermione's handiwork, and had altered the ward with a spell of transfiguration so convincing it had fooled a killing curse. "No one is to harm the children or staff of this school." McGonagall's voice rang like a bell across the courtyard. The earth answered as if listening. A chimera of rock, 3 stories tall, rose from the soil, lion's head, venomous snake tail that spat flame. Its lava-red eyes fixed on the dark wizards, and it roared. "Retreat!" Snape barked, sending several powerful curses in their wake, but even Sectum Sempra and blasting curses did little against the stone beast. The dark wizards had no room to fall back. Behind them, the iron perimeter fence twisted and grew, becoming an impenetrable, writhing steel thicket. Professor Sprout, her face full of furious determination, had used her plant magic to armor and animate the barrier into a living, metal jungle. Caught between the chimera and the steel jungle, the invaders scrambled, firing backwards and cursing. Sprout seized the chance to fling Mundungus into the tangle, dragging him to safety. Bellatrix twisted into a black vapor and darted away, reappearing at the left flank with her wand alight for another killing curse at McGonagall. A silver light lanced out and shattered the green beam mid-formation. Flitwick, his animated silver hand gripping his wand, stepped forward. "I shall be your opponent," he said, and moved like a duelist reborn. Above them, a brilliant phoenix burst from the top of the tower through the gap in the barrier and dove into the dark cloud of skeletal figures overhead. A blinding flash and a thunderous blast erupted from the cloud. The phoenix's cry cut through the chaos. "Hogwarts, faculty and students, resist the invaders!" McGonagall's voice rose again. Firenze the centaur stamped out of the crowd, loosing arrows at a werewolf among the attackers. Filch, absurdly courageous in his old caretaker's uniform, trailed him. Professors and older students surged into the fray, Quirrell and others organizing the teens into formations, and rapidly every duel found an opponent. No one entered the churning miasmic center where Lily and Snape traded potions and counter-potions. Snape's raw power was greater, but Lily's gleanings from Hermione's theoretical work in potions had given her new tricks. The two of them constantly dissolved and remade concoctions in the swirling fog, each canceling the other's work. Bellatrix, used to terror more than formal duels, found herself at a disadvantage against the half-goblin dueling experience of Flitwick. She threw death curses and malignant arts with reckless flourish, but Flitwick's precise charms and counterspells slowly pushed her back, compressing her space to dodge. The Chimera and the Steel Jungle advanced, forcing the intruders into tighter contact. Spells flew in all directions and hit madly. The older students, organized and let loose, rained hexes down on those who dared breach the school. From a window, Harry watched, blood boiling. He grabbed his flail, ready to rush out. "No, we're first years. You won't help," Hermione snapped, pulling him back. "You'll only add to the chaos. The professors have the advantage now." Still, unease gnawed at her. If the Death Eaters believed themselves beaten, they wouldn't keep pressing. There was a reason they had come fully armed. Then a sound threaded through the tumult, a clean, cold bell toll that set Hermione's skin prickling. Her face went pale. "Oh no, Lucius," she whispered. The tolls multiplied like a summons from death itself. The ghosts of the castle rose, howling and flaring. From the green cloud above, the phoenix fell from the sky in a streak, returning to the tower top, and from that cloud a figure emerged. He laughed, maniacal and small against the light, and his wand poured out a blast of terrifying green fire that shattered a great section of the barrier. McGonagall's face went hard. Ignoring the scattering dark wizards, she leapt onto the Chimera's mane. The stone beast shuddered, massive wings unfurled, and it reshaped itself into a hideous rock dragon. With McGonagall astride its head, it launched into the sky, claws tearing wind, flying straight toward the one who had transcended death, Lord Voldemort. The battle outside the castle was a feint. Lord Voldemort's real trump card was Lucius Malfoy, hidden inside the castle. Hermione put the pieces together in an instant. Old Malfoy loved Draco. When he learned his son had been exposed, he'd made a desperate last move. He'd contacted Voldemort to draw the professors away with an obvious attack, while he took advantage of the chaos to pull something far more dangerous off inside the school. He'd pretended it was to protect Draco, to have him withdrawn from Hogwarts, so the professors would throw their defenses into escorting him. What they didn't know was that two adult wizards walking Draco out could just as easily be bodyguards. In the confusion, they would spirit Draco away while Lucius slipped upstairs, bypassed the traps that the professors didn't control, and stole the Philosopher's Stone. Voldemort outside would be the diversion until Lucius had succeeded. Then, when the stone was gone and Hogwarts had lost its last reserve of energy, Voldemort would descend in earnest. But if that were so, why had Dumbledore's phoenix fallen? Hermione frowned. She didn't believe Dumbledore could be bested so easily. The phoenix's fall had to be linked to the ghost riot somehow. But why had Lucius, powerful enough to make a phoenix fall, still needed to steal the stone in secret and been driven to violence by two professors? There wasn't time to solve every mystery. Sky Eye had already warned her. With all the professors out fighting, an uncontrolled ghost riot would be catastrophic. And Lucius was using that moment to get the stone. She could only deal with one threat at a time. She chose Lucius. "Everyone hide here. Don't go out," she told the others in a voice that brooked no argument. "If any ghosts break in." She paused, and a ball of spirit fire flared into being in the middle of the classroom, burning with a cold blue light. Use this to drive them away. Hermione, where are you going? Harry called, desperate. To save those foolish professors, she said, and there was steel in her voice. She thought of Professor McGonagall, riding a stone dragon and charging at something that moved like death itself, and knew she couldn't wait. Turning invisible and reforging her disguise, she slipped from the room and was gone, leaving Harry and the others staring after the closed door with complicated looks. The corridor was empty. Younger students were massed in the great hall or hiding in their dormitories. Only the shrill roars of the ghosts filled the castle. Hermione ran to the moving staircase and saw the ghosts phasing through the walls from the highest tower, roaring and flinging themselves wildly about. They're coming from the top, the headmaster's office, she thought. There was no time to linger. The irrational ghosts didn't notice the invisible girl as she raced past. She reached the one-eyed witch statue and dove into the cave beneath it, taking the shortcut. If Lucius had to get past Aragog's guard, it would take him time. Hermione's plan was to cut across and retrieve the stone herself, then deal with Lucius. The portkey held. After a dizzying spin, she arrived in the enclosed hall. The stone was there. She plucked it free. The closed bud at the tip of her silver-white staff unfurled as if waking, and the Philosopher's Stone seated itself into the blossom. Energy flowed through the staff with a force that made her knees go weak. Her staff had been modified from a Chernobyl goblin metal control rod. Otherwise, a normal wand could never have borne such a load. With the stone embedded, the staff thrummed in her hand. She felt suddenly dangerously sure she could face Malfoy. Then the wall exploded. A huge shape smashed through the stonework and landed with a thunderous impact in front of her. Dust and debris swirled. As she stirred up a small breeze to clear it, Hermione saw what lay on the floor. Aragog's enormous body splayed on its side, but folded against the spider's thorax was another figure that made her vision tilt. Hagrid. The name came out as a whisper and a shock all at once. Hagrid lay against Aragog, his lower body joined to the spider's. Everything snapped into place. Every time she'd seen Hagrid in the cave, he'd been wrapped in a dirty cloak. She'd never seen his legs. When they had seen Aragog beyond the fourth-floor door, Hagrid had been in the shadow above it. Now she understood why Hagrid's disappearance had taken a chunk of rock with it, and why he'd begged them not to look at Aragog. If the creature had its eyes closed and lay still, its carapace did look like a great lump of rock. Hagrid turned his head with effort, and when he saw her, croaked weakly, "Why are you here? Get out!" He tried to rise, but a magically spun net dropped from the air, and a small enchanted globe that shrieked with a high, rasping hiss rolled to his side. Hagrid curled over, pain twisting his features. "Beasts are beasts," Lucius's voice said from the dust, unhurried and thinly amused. "If you were at Malfoy Manor, you'd only become material for the experimental table." He stepped forward and raised his chin toward the pair on the floor, as if displaying a prize. "Look, isn't this Gryffindor's most promising little girl? What an unexpected surprise." Hermione's eyes were cold. Beside him, a dark gold bell hovered, chiming faintly. The chime trembled like a heartbeat. She knew at once that it was the magical object that had sent the ghosts into a frenzy. "What did Voldemort promise you to push the master of Malfoy Manor into his thrall?" she asked. Lucius's face flickered at that. "You know a lot, don't you? Did McGonagall tell you everything? But you don't understand how much sway my name holds in Malfoy Manor," he sniffed. He tapped his long bone staff and heavy magic cut the air like a blade. "Hand over the stone. Voldemort will make me the real master of Malfoy Manor. As for you," he smiled with all the malice of a snake, "perhaps I'll be merciful and give you the quick end." "Hermione, quick, go," Hagrid croaked, straining to whisper. Connected as he was to Aragog, he couldn't tolerate the basilisk hiss's influence. It subdued him, and the noise made him double over. With a roar that sent a spider leg twitching, he slapped a loose stone brick with the last of his strength. The hall flared to life. Old defensive enchantments, set by other professors, fired up and crackled. But Hermione didn't move. She rested a hand on her staff and stared at Lucius. "A rat frightened by the fire of blind ambition," she said slowly, every word precise. "You lack the qualities to be a king. Somehow, when I look at you, you look familiar." She drove the tip of the silver-white staff into the ground. Light poured from it like water, bright blue azure energy spilling outward in a sheet. Shining stone meteor. Hermione didn't even need to wind up. With the Philosopher's Stone as a source, brilliant bolts of light poured from her staff like a torrential downpour. Lucius, for once, wasn't the swaggering showman of the practical lessons. His alchemical trinkets flashed along his sleeves, and layers of protego and other wards unfurled. He didn't so much cast a counterspell as simply let the defenses take the barrage. "Did that Philosopher's Stone give you courage?" he sneered. "You really think you can beat me?" He didn't try to stop her with a single counterattack. He advanced calmly. At the same time, the protections Hagrid had triggered flared fully to life. The plants around the hall, whose activity had been held in check, awoke at once. Vines and tendrils snaked free, tasting the air for living scent. The enchanted wizard's chess pieces around the room animated too. The knights and rooks locked onto Lucius and charged with crushing momentum, while the kings and bishops stayed back, raising scepters and firing spells. Lucius eyed the throng with contempt. "Little toys Professor McGonagall and Flitwick put together," he said, glancing at the plants, "and Professor Sprout's foolish potted things." The defense the three deans had set up together was cohesive. Enchanted chess pieces that could cast spells and coordinate close and long-range strikes, and tenacious, varied magical flora that made for stubborn, needless to say, lethal defenders. Any intruder caught between those attacks would soon be worn down. Lucius flicked his wand. A stronger barrier snapped into place. Several trinkets on his person cracked and dimmed, only for replacements to fly up from his bag of holding. He turned to Hagrid with a satisfied look. "You didn't think the Slytherin dean, would be defenseless, did you?" Hagrid's face fell. Of course Lucius had contributed to the defenses, at least at first, before the professors excluded him. Before Hagrid could do more than gape, Hermione dropped from the air. A brilliant blue blade of light flared at the tip of her staff and drove straight for Lucius. Carrion's swift blade. But the attack didn't cleave him, as it had almost split him in the duel earlier. A small bird-shaped brass device floated to Lucius's side, and a deep black barrier took the tip of Hermione's lightsaber. Sparks flew as the Carrion blade slammed into it, strong enough to show how powerful the spell was, but the device seemed designed to counter cutting energy attacks, holding steady. Hermione's face didn't change. She shifted the blade through several arcs, each collision singing like cold water on hot iron. "Similar to Sectum Sempra. No dark marks, a bit weaker," Lucius said, triumphant. "Worth every nut to buy one." He tapped his staff. From the walls around them, countless dark barrels unfurled, pneumatic gun muzzles. "Let me show you the power of Muggle weapons," he announced, spreading his arms. Hermione thought, not good. She rolled, lunged for Hagrid. A heartbeat later, the steam rifles thundered. A hail of explosive rounds and flashes swept the hall. The enchanted statues and plants were shredded. As reversal of anti-wizard techniques had taught them, every 5 ordinary rounds were interspersed with a goblin metal armor-piercing shot. The goblin metal's magic-sundered quality left the plants and animated pieces helpless. The rifles kept roaring until there was nothing left intact in the hall. Stones smashed, plant debris and sap running in rivulets across the cracked floor. Hermione crawled free from Hagrid's embrace. The Acromantula's bulk had taken many bullet holes across its carapace, but thanks to its tremendous size, those impacts were superficial. The shots hadn't stopped him. Hermione kicked away the shattered magic orb she'd struck earlier and listened as the basilisk's last cry died. Hagrid heaved himself upright, shaking grit, casings, and snapped ropes off his joints. Lucius stood in the smoke, not remotely alarmed. After clearing away the other professor's measures, the room had become his ground. "Clever," he said. "But besides pneumatic rifles, what do you suppose I brought?" Like an actor in a grand production, he waved his wand. A clattering came from inside the walls, and dark ports burst open, fragmentation grenades. "Damn!" Hermione's frown tightened. Under the pretense of teaching and traps, how much Muggle ordnance had Lucius brought in? Hagrid's expression grew grave. Bullets hadn't fazed him much, but grenades detonating in a confined space could. He bent and whispered, "Hide under me. When he looks away, run." He was ready to sacrifice himself to cover her escape. Lucius had more than guns, alchemy bombs, too. As master of Malfoy Manor, he could buy an arsenal. Standing and trading fire with him would be madness. Before they could carry out the plan, fierce flames flared along the hall. Lucius's own bombs detonated, blowing the walls apart. The pneumatic rifles and his other setups were destroyed in the same instant. Boom after boom filled the air. Thick smoke rolled through the room, while flying slabs of stone made the scene worse than the rifle hail. The ceiling blew apart, but the pieces were ripped and sliced midair. Protected by Hagrid, Hermione wasn't harmed. When she looked up, they saw the hall had become a suspended platform, a single island floating in a huge cavern. Beyond the broken rim stretched a vast underground chamber, and all around their little platform walls of fire roared, an encircling blaze. The doorway that had once opened to the fourth-floor corridor was now 100 meters away, the platform severed from the outer world. "Is it a trap?" Hermione whispered. The floor of the hall sloped gently toward the center. Sap and torn plant parts were slowly pooling at the lowest point. The broken walls formed a rim. The surrounding flames looked like a fire under a cauldron. It dawned on her. This was not just destruction. It was a brewing vessel. Lucius realized it a split second before she did and cursed, furious. That Potter woman, when did she set this? Hermione scanned the scene. McGonagall had warned them about Lucius. She wouldn't have left such a large loophole. Mrs. Potter must have been the final safeguard. She had added a secondary defensive measure secretly after Lucius's preparations. This was a potion ritual. Sprout's plants had been chosen carefully. In Lily Potter's cauldron ritual, living plants could guard the stone. Once killed, they became potion ingredients. If Hermione was right, the statue powders from McGonagall's arrangements contained potion components too. From the ruin of the enchanted pieces, some glowing dust rose up and mixed with the gases boiling off the heat. Even the gun barrels, gunpowder and goblin metal Lucius had laid out were serving as ingredient materials in Mrs. Potter's brew. The air grew hotter by the second. Hagrid scooped Hermione up and with a single crouch launched himself dozens of meters away to land on a hanging stalactite column. A spider's leap was terrifying and its grip unshakable. They hung above the cavern, Hagrid dangling like a monstrous pendulum, Hermione steady in his arms, watching the scene below. The gun barrels and statues began to slump and melt under the strange brewing effect. Lucius knew he couldn't linger. If he stayed, Lily Potter's ritual could literally brew him into something unknown and lethal. But a strange thing happened. Inside the cauldron's influence, magic seemed to be suppressed. Lucius tried and found his spells falter. Without magic, he couldn't jump to safety. He was trapped. "How brilliant," Hermione breathed, looking at the mechanism with fierce fascination. This wasn't a general anti-magic curse, but a byproduct of the potion they were making, a natural anti-magic effect arising from the brewing process. Lily's potion research had always been inventive. Some potions required the brewer to imitate animal calls or perform absurd actions. Those rituals, subjective and illogical, produced specific effects. Lily had taken a rare potion that needed a living wizard as a material and adapted the brewing so it turned the presence of a hostile intruder into the potion's fuel, making the entire hall into an automated, deadly trap. She'd even tailored the ingredients to include the Muggle rifles and grenades Lucius had brought. Better yet, the potion didn't need a potioneer to tend it. The whole apparatus was prearranged, waiting for a trigger. It was audacious. Hagrid shifted, awkward. "You not afraid of me?" he asked, voice small, his spider body rolling its cloudy eyes. Hermione smiled without looking away at the cauldron below. "Why would I be afraid of you?" she said. "You're Hagrid." Hagrid's voice dropped to a thin, buzzing whisper. "But I look like this. No one likes something that looks like this. Are there any rune spore left? I'm a bit hungry." She hadn't eaten since before dinner, and the rat. Hermione deftly slipped a small piece of dried rune spore from Hagrid's thick coat and munched happily. Hagrid couldn't help but grin. Beneath them, Aragog clicked and clacked. From hidden recesses in the cave came a skittering chorus as spider swarms gathered. As the spiders swarmed, Hagrid and Hermione watched Lucius in the boiling center. The heat warped the air and his figure shimmered. "Will he die here?" Hagrid asked. "I don't think so," Hermione said cautiously. "Mrs. Potter's trap is lethal, but Lucius is rich, and he has Lord Voldemort behind him. We should expect another round. She swallowed the last bite of runespore, dusted her hands, and tightened her grip on her staff. 55. Castle Chase. After several failed attempts to fly out of the potion cauldron using his spring legs and winged cloak, Lucius finally found another option. He withdrew a small bottle of dark green potion from his bag. This was brewed for Dumbledore, he told himself, a draught meant to kill outright, cursed by Lord Voldemort himself. It has to be used here, he thought. The surest way to undo a potion was to add another potion to it. Lucius didn't dare guess at how Lily's calculations might account for ordinary mixtures. Some additions might do nothing, some might speed the ritual, and some could annihilate everything in the cauldron. But a potion designed by Voldemort to end life was beyond Lily's likely parameters. He had no choice. With a hard breath, he pulled the stopper and flung the draught into the churning mass of liquid hanging in the air. The dark green potion sank into the ritual like an eraser. It silently turned the floating matter into green smoke. There was no explosion, no boil, nothing theatrical. The ceremony simply dissolved. If Lily herself had been here, perhaps she could have reconfigured the ritual in an instant, but she was not. She was locked in combat with Snape outside the castle, and Lucius's desperate act destroyed the spell she'd set. The anti-magic effect faded. Magic returned to the cavern. He paused, wand still, and looked up toward Hagrid and the other figure above the cave. At that moment, a vast shadow fell from the sky. Hagrid brought down a heavy stone pillar with a thunderous crash. Dust exploded everywhere. Where the pillar shattered, Lucius's alchemical instruments and creations were scattered and ruined. "Damn," Lucius muttered. He scanned the shadows for the hidden form of Hermione with his peripheral vision. He had been carrying many magical devices, but the sustained, high-intensity fighting had already cost him a fortune in lost creations. Hagrid was monstrously strong and stubbornly resistant to magic. He charged through spells and struck head-on, but his magic was rudimentary and could be manipulated by someone like Lucius. The unseen Hermione were the real threat. A first-year who had already mastered disillusionment and who had likely learned other tricks could turn Hagrid into a far deadlier force. Once his alchemy tools were wrecked, Granger's light blade would be poised to strike. And the Acromantula were gathering. When they surged like a tide, his bombs might not be enough. Retreat flashed through his mind. Service to Lord Voldemort was not the same as loyalty to one's own life. If he could get back to Malfoy Manor, he could answer to Dumbledore later with money and excuses. He would not throw his life away now. He pointed his wand and transfigured the stones at his feet into giant snakes that lunged at Hagrid. The spiders under Hagrid's feet plowed through them like a tank. The stone serpents shattered uselessly. Lucius's transfiguration lacked McGonagall's strength. His constructs were simply too weak. If he could have turned himself into a real basilisk, he might have ended the fight. Confronted with Hagrid's charge, Lucius did not stand and trade blows. The cloak at his back grew wings, yanking him into the air, and he cast a powerful blasting curse toward Hagrid's head. 2 alchemical bombs followed the curse, meant to amplify its force. But before the bombs could reach their target, 2 gleaming, shining stone pebbles detonated them prematurely. The mid-air explosions rocked Lucius off balance. Hagrid leapt up through the thunder of blasts, his hair and beard singed at the edges, but otherwise unhurt. Aragog's fangs and Hagrid's iron fist arrived at the same instant. Lucius, flung by the force of the blow, threw a magical cloak over the spider's maw to buy time. He himself was punched clear, several shield charms on his person shattering in the impact, but the damage gave him the opening he needed. He beat his newly formed wings and surged toward the 4th-floor corridor door, scattering a powder that glittered like crystal to form a barrier against the advancing spider swarm. Hagrid landed hard in the Great Hall. Hermione appeared at his side out of thin air. She helped pull the cloak from Aragog's face, then leapt onto Hagrid's back and closed her arms around him. "We can't let him get away," she called. "That bell is still affecting the ghosts." She waved her wand, and a gust of wind blew the crystalline mist aside. Hagrid gathered himself and closed the distance in 2 massive bounds. Aragog pushed off, silk glands swelling, and spat a web that snared the entire 100-meter stretch in an instant. Lucius, however, tore his winged cloak apart. Feathers filled the air, and for a moment the web was slowed while he shrank into a cloud of black smoke and shot through the corridor door. Hagrid used the stone pillars of the cave to launch himself through the doorway, smashing the narrow wooden doorframe and squeezing into the corridor. The passage, though, was still too cramped for Aragog to follow in his true form. Hermione fretted for a second. Then Hagrid, smiling in that broad, naive way, pulled out his small pink umbrella and tapped the great spider. In a blink, both Hagrid and Aragog shrank to ordinary human size. "This is the only magic I'm really good at," Hagrid said, grinning. "Aragog doesn't like it none, so I usually let him be." Hermione, clinging to his clothes, pointed down the corridor. "Chase!" "Don't worry," Hagrid answered. "Aragog's nose is dead keen. He won't lose him." The shrunken Aragog moved fast. His 8 legs were still flexible enough to climb walls and creep along ceilings. He ghosted down the corridor following the scent of old Malfoy. It was fortunate there were no students left in the castle to witness it. They would have been terrified. A few ghosts spotted Lucius and Hagrid. The bell that controlled them still tugged at their wills, but Hermione, quick and fierce, held up spirit fire and drove the lost dead back. Neither side was significantly slowed by the apparitions. Hermione peered out a high window as they ran. Without Professor McGonagall moving to reinforce them, the dark wizards, though battered, had stabilized their positions and were trading spells with the teachers who rallied the students. The battles among the professors were fierce and uncertain. Overhead, a terrible green cloud pressed down on the sky. A shattered stone dragon, barely aloft and coughing flashes of light, fought to remain in the air. Everyone could see the truth. If Professor McGonagall fell, there would be no hope for the students below. Hermione bit her lip and did what she could. She cast levitation charms and adjusted the gravity around Hagrid, lightening his steps so he could run faster, and clung on as the chase pressed deeper into the castle. 56. Phase 3. Following the scent, they chased it all the way to the door of a girls' washroom on the 2nd floor. "What is old Malfoy doing in the girls' restroom?" Hermione asked, puzzled. Rumor had it someone had died in that bathroom. The girls avoided it, and it was usually deserted. When they pushed the door open, they saw that the old row of sinks had split apart, revealing a deep, dark pipe opening that was slowly closing. The two exchanged a look. "It's a secret passage." Hagrid took the lead, bracing the basin with his great hands. "Quick, let's go after him." Hermione slipped down first, Hagrid hot on her heels. The pipe was filthy and pitch black, seemingly endless. Hermione felt herself sliding down, farther and farther beneath the castle and its dungeons. Behind her, she heard Hagrid's heavy scraping. At last, the slope eased, and they shot out like cannonballs, landing on a damp floor. Both hit without serious injury, Hermione with the reflexes and experience from her previous life, Hagrid with the uncanny balance of a half-giant who had spent his life outside. "Is this the bottom of the sewer?" Hermione asked. Hagrid sniffed the air, his face tightening. "This place, it's full of basilisk scent. This secret passage and this huge sewer system. I've never heard of them," Hermione said. "Aragog's uneasy, like he was 50 years ago," Hagrid muttered. "Basilisk, the Chamber of Secrets." Hermione's eyes widened. "Hagrid, you said the Chamber of Secrets was opened 50 years ago and someone died. Myrtle, right? A basilisk killed her. Is this Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets?" Hagrid slapped his forehead. "Oh, poor Myrtle. She was killed in the loo upstairs, so that was the entrance to the chamber. Oh my goodness. 50 years, and I've finally found out what happened." Hermione's face shifted. Relief, anger, grief all mixed across her features. 50 years ago, Tom Riddle was only in his 5th year. He found the chamber and set the basilisk on a student. He covered it up, kept the secret. But now Lucius has come down here. Maybe he's following instructions Riddle left, or escaping through the same route. She looked at the dark pipe. "Is there a way out of Hogwarts from here?" Hagrid rubbed his head, thinking. If the basilisk belonged to Slytherin, there'd be tunnels, ways down to the Black Lake so it could hunt. After 1,000 years, some of those tunnels would be broken. Lucius could have used one to get out and apparat from the shore. "Not only that," Hermione said, studying him, "just the smell of a basilisk would sap your strength, wouldn't it?" Hagrid's face went grim. Basilisks were natural enemies of Acromantila's, Aragog and his brood would be badly affected. Hagrid looked helpless. He wants a one-on-one duel here, Hermione continued, voice firm. As long as Lucius is in the school, the ghosts will keep rioting, and Dumbledore will be hamstrung. Whether or not that bell and the ghosts are linked, if Dumbledore is held back, Voldemort will gain the upper hand. The Philosopher's Stone, and everyone at this school, could fall into Voldemort's hands. And Lucius could truly become master of Malfoy Manor, Hagrid said softly. Stay here, Hagrid. You can't go any further. Hermione set a hand on his arm. Gather your spider brood and clear this place bit by bit. Let them take the strain of the basilisk's presence. I'll go after Lucius. Hagrid shook his head like a rattle. Hermione, are you mad? You're going to face Lucius alone? And maybe a 1,000-year-old basilisk? Hermione shook her head calmly. Only a Parselmouth can control a basilisk, and Parseltongue doesn't run in Malfoy blood. The basilisk was taken away long ago by Riddle. Lucius is dangerous, but he's a man whose trump cards are worn out and whose magic is half drained. I can handle him. She flicked her wand, and a knot of starlight gathered at its tip, then darted into the darkness. No one had used these passages for decades. Lucius was probably down here for the first time, too. Though Hagrid's nose was lost to her in the smell, Hermione traced Lucius by the damp footprints and, after encountering the bell, by her sky eye's heightened sensitivity. Her instincts guided her true. Along the way, she passed an enormous shed snakeskin and was glad Hagrid hadn't followed. If the basilisk's scent had gotten to him, he would be nearly immobile. Before long, she reached a stone wall with an open doorway. Inside, a dimly lit chamber lay ahead, waterlight flickering along both sides, and a lone figure stood motionless. She stepped into the stone chamber. The braziers ignited in sequence, bathing the room in light and revealing Lucius. He stood with cold fury curled on his face. If Voldemort had only taught me a few more Parseltongue phrases, he sneered. If he'd let me bring the basilisk here to raise, how pathetic I am. He spat the words like poison. You, filthy half-Spider-Man, McGonagall, Dumbledore, you'll all die under the basilisk's gaze. Hermione tilted her head, puzzled by Lucius's confidence that a single basilisk could slay professors like McGonagall or Dumbledore. Lucius's mouth twisted into a malicious smile. Even better now. The disgusting spider monster can't reach here, and we've got time. I knew you'd come alone. You brainless Gryffindors do everything on impulse. On his shoulder, the dark gold bell swung with lazy indifference. He drew his cane. Its tip sparked black fire across the stone. Come on, Granger. Let's finish the duel we started in class. Show me how much you've learned. Water rose from the pool on both sides, coalescing into 3 streams of pitch-black, snake-shaped water that lunged at Hermione. Shining stone meteor, she cried. She stepped back and raised her wand. A barrage of blue meteors, shot from the Philosopher's Stone, tore through the attacking water snake heads, shattering them into sprayed water. With a vast energy source at her command, Hermione began to unleash the destructive potential of the Shining Stone magic. Magic Realm! A complex magic circle unfolded beneath her feet, bathing her robes in blue light. Her hair lifted as if in a wind she alone could feel. For a moment, she looked like a resolute goddess. The Magic Realm, a circle etched into the ground, greatly amplified the power of the caster standing within it. Hermione had learned of it in the highest tower of Raya Lucaria Academy, a magic circle that could cover an entire academy, turning an unskilled starter into a formidable wizard. That clear, perfect image of success flashed through her like inspiration, steadying her as the duel escalated. Skyfall magic. Hermione planted her staff into the stone and chanted, drawing a ring of power around her. The Philosopher's Stone on her staff pulsed, condensing into a vast ball of energy that burst into a storm of crystalline light, a shower of deadly motes aimed straight at Lucius. This was an old Crystal School spell, one taught to wizards who had once forged pacts with the Crystallians. Lucius stumbled back, surprised by the sudden onslaught. He didn't want to waste more artifacts on blunt defense. He needed to preserve his best protections. He swept his own staff, deflecting the incoming shards, and made an ungainly combat roll, using nearby pillars and braziers as cover against the wide-area attack. Crystal Barrage, a torrent of dazzling crystal shards, smashed the brazier he had been hiding behind. Lucius rolled away, shaken, He had not expected the spell to be so powerful. The crystal attack was bolstered by the magic realm, and with the Philosopher's Stone supplying nearly limitless energy, Hermione's assault never slowed. She planted herself at the center of the circle, wand leveled like a fixed turret, and continued to pour streams of Philosopher's Stone crystals at him. They fell like a fragmented storm, relentless. Malfoy cursed his earlier decisions with rising regret. He pushed Earth Transfiguration through his staff, pulling up blocks of stone and slapping them together into an iron wall to block the assault. He flung things at her. Water turned to snakes, sparks shaped into firehawks, but each projectile was shot down, one after another. For a brief memory, the roles flipped to that disastrous practical class where Lucius had bombarded and Hermione had ducked and dodged in turn. It had been naive to imagine defeating the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor so easily. Beneath Hermione's boots, something wriggled. She stopped her spell at once, cast a levitation charm on herself, and leapt up. Triangular iron spikes erupted where she had stood. The magic circle cleaved apart. The iron wall in front of Lucius splintered. He dropped to one knee, feeding transfiguration through his staff, hair uncombed, his composure gone. Too strong, Hermione thought, not about herself or Lucius, but about the Philosopher's Stone. With its help, she could rival a seasoned dean in sheer firepower. Lucius's face twisted with fury. Filthy mudblood. Avada Kedavra. A green flash lashed from his staff. The killing curse shot like a living streak of death. Hermione didn't have Professor McGonagall's capacity for conjuring faithful living beasts, but since she learned the nature of this so-called unstoppable curse, she had been scheming for counters. The killing curse's fatal flaw was obvious. It was useless if it missed. Distracting it, confusing its target, or interposing a barrier would defeat it, but its speed made these options hard in a split-second duel. She had one trick up her sleeve. Not the precise, timing-dependent carrion retaliation she had once used successfully. The spell required immaculate timing she couldn't rely on, and not a high-risk combat role that would only play into Lucius's rhythm. Instead, she turned to another death-affiliated technique, Fia's Mist. The spell of Fia, the deathbed companion, exhaled from the tip of her staff as a black gold vapor, a mist steeped in an instant death abnormal status. In the Forbidden Land, it was used against Tarnished of the Round Table hold. Victims in the mist accumulated an instant death condition until, no matter how strong or protected, black death roots would burst from within and finish them. The 100-legged brand of death unfurled at her staff's head as the mist rolled out. Lucius's green lightning struck the vapor. For a heartbeat, the thunder struck true, but the mist absorbed and diffused the energy. The green bolt split and fanned into a branching lightning tree that stained the fog a ghastly green. Two magics of death collided, one lightning-fast and narrow, one slow and insidious. The lightning found no solid target and dissipated, its power lost. It worked, Hermione breathed. Lucius staggered back, eyes wide. The chill of that mist, death's chill, threatened to unmoor him. Hermione kept the vapor spreading toward him. He dared not enter it. He didn't trust even his shield charm to block whatever the fog carried. He swirled into black smoke and rose, climbing up to the towering Slytherin statue. From his bottomless bag, he produced a broom and mounted it. "Brat," he barked, "I hear you fly like a child. Feel what aerial supremacy is." Curses rained from above. Hermione's lips curved. She used her staff to deflect the bolts until he was over her. Then she spread her fingers and pulled the gravity down with a sharp, controlled pull. The invisible weight intensified. The broom bucked as Lucius, unready, plummeted. Hermione changed stance and thrust her staff forward. Carrion Swiftblade. A blade of bright, surgical light darted toward the falling professor, but it would barely nick his iron armor barrier. He had the Sectum Sempra iron armor oriented to stop cutting curses. Hermione did not rely on only one trick. The Philosopher's Stone flared. The light of her sword thickened, swelled, and exploded outward. Carrion Piercer! The one-handed blade swelled into a gigantic, spear-like greatsword. It struck through Lucius's layered protections with raw, penetrating force until it met the black barrier of the Sectum Sempra iron armor and smashed against it. The barrier shuddered. Hairline cracks spidered out from the sword's point. Lucius's broom was severed. He reacted with the speed of a man used to living by a hair. At the last moment, he summoned a hurricane around himself and ripped away, landing with a stumble. He retreated, breath coming fast, and looked down at the flimsy brass instrument that had protected him, shredded, near collapse, and thinly clinging together by spells. Hermione recognized the barrier's strength. She still couldn't underestimate the world's magic. What she didn't know was that the Sectum Sempra iron armor was a rare Beauxbaton's alchemical achievement, one of the few artifacts that could actually stand up to Snape's Sectum Sempra when it was first circulated in certain circles. It was costly and not easily purchased. Lucius had paid dearly. His mind scraped at a single urge: retreat. Losing again to a first-year mudblood would wound his pride, but he valued his life more. He glanced at the gargantuan Slytherin statue behind Hermione. He could flee through the statue's mouth and the tunnel beyond. But first, he had to get past the girl, and the gravity field held him to the ground. Hermione leaned on her staff, waiting, the Philosopher's Stone humming at her hip. Surrender. You don't have a chance. Hand me the bell. Let the professors decide your fate. At least Draco can stay at school. Lucius sneered, furious. Draco? Someone already got him out. He'll be home by now. Hermione's mouth tightened. He took Potter's invisibility cloak. Right now, your people are probably running around the castle like headless chickens. Lucius's expression crumpled from anger into panic. That idiot! He seized the bell at his side, always dangerous, and as she had feared, it answered to his grip. A deathly aura poured from it. Dark, seeking curses exploded outward. Hermione smirked faintly. His mind was scattered, his aim was sloppy. She had prepared for this. A thick, white, perfumed mist hissed from the bead of her staff and swallowed the corridor. She had combined an inciting spray from an apothecary with a cloud of fog spell. The result wasn't lethal, but it was richly hallucinogenic, belladonna and similar alkaloids blooming through each inhalation. The white vapor clung to Lucius. It would not trigger shield charm in the way a poison would, but his thinking would fray the more he breathed it. That was the plan. Hidden in the fog, she tossed a smoldering parcel of phosphorus flower powder at the shield charm wrapped around Lucius. It stuck, burned like a stubborn ember on the barrier, and began to eat at the wards. The bell's chime trembled in his hand, the death aura still humming, but his vision began to double. He lashed out with cursings aimlessly, but the hallucinogenic cloud and the burning incense on his protections made his perception fail. Shame, the ruin of his plans, and the imagined threat to Draco wedged into his panic. The sneakoscope in his pocket spun like a mad thing. He yanked artifact after artifact from his bottomless bag: necklaces, rings, trinkets, badges, buttons, activating protections and talismans until his body shimmered under layer upon layer of desperate spellwork. Keep hold of the bell, he told himself. Escape. Save Draco. Beat the boy when you have him. Hermione's voice rose, cold and precise. Taste this. She called the Carrion Greatsword again, the Ash of War, the Knight's Blade, which could swell in 3-staged charges. She fed the Philosopher's Stone into the charge, letting the blade grow monstrously with a keening hum. The slow wind-up meant risk, but once the weapon finished, nothing could stand against it. Kalia! The sword's light slammed down. A blast of white radiance became a cutting gale. The fog shredded. A column of stone exploded outward as if struck by a meteor. The single stroke cleaved the paved path in two. Lucius's tools and trinkets, piled around him in frantic magical defense, disintegrated into dust and ash. He himself crumpled unconscious where he stood. Hermione had stopped at the last millimeter. Slaying Malfoy outright would win nothing more than another corpse. Keeping him alive would be infinitely more useful to professors and the school. She approached and secured him with 2 quick stupefy bolts, then used levitation to hoist his inert form. The bell in his hands no longer rang without its conductor, but she could feel the lingering chill of death within it. She wrapped the bell carefully in a scrap of Lucius's robe, not a gesture for cleanliness, but to contain the residual corruption, and slid it into her pocket. With the bell silenced and the last pulses of the Philosopher's Stone dying down, she cast one last charm to stabilize Lucius's field, then levitated him lightly and hurried toward the sewer entrance, toward where the tunnels under the school yawned and the light was thin. 58. Counterattack. The stone dragon circling the sky had been reduced to an almost formless mass. McGonagall could feel her magic running out. She had nothing left to rebuild it. Voldemort toyed with her, dismantling her transfigurations piece by piece. Honestly, Professor, your transfiguration work probably surpasses Dumbledore's. Even I find it hard to keep up with you in that field, he sneered, floating in the air amid a freezing wind. Ghostly shapes swirled around him, their screams shrill and pained. McGonagall's face had gone pale. She kept urging the stone dragon to smash into him, to use its fiery breath to burn through the death clouds, but it was hopeless. No matter how masterful her transfigurations, this stone construct was stronger than a living dragon. Voldemort reveled in her desperation. He used the killing curse methodically, extinguishing one small protection after another, little life anchors hidden in her anti-death vest, merely to watch her edge toward despair. Transfiguration is a dead end, he mocked. All your skill means nothing in the face of death. He smiled as if he'd come upon a private joke. So many purebloods wanted to join me. Before the war, I almost believed them, but strip away the lies. What sacred families, what nobility, what love and equality remain? Look behind you, he taunted. Lucius did not fail me. Dumbledore is in danger, and your students. His face twisted into a grotesque, pitying grin. They are going to be slaughtered by ghosts. It must be difficult. Those ghosts were once your friends. With a casual wave, without any visible incantation, his raw power tore one of the dragon's wings off. The creature lost balance and spun in the air. Proud of snatching tasty treats from my hand? Your little feast must have been delicious, yes? He said, and another bolt turned the dragon's other wing to ash. McGonagall clung to the crumbling stone back, forcing the last of her power into one final change. She transformed the crippled dragon into a giant eagle. She had hoped to summon a thunderbird, but she no longer had the strength. If Hogwarts falls today, it will be after my death, she roared. The giant eagle lunged at Voldemort. In her other hand, McGonagall fashioned a whirlwind that condensed or hardened into spinning gear-like blades that closed in around him. Voldemort watched impassively, letting the blades bash against him. When the eagle struck, it detonated in a blinding blast. McGonagall hung in midair, exhausted. This had been her last gambit. Green smoke gathered behind her, and in the same motion, Voldemort's wand was at her back. "You do like explosions, don't you?" he said, and sent a blinding banner of white light, an exploding curse, toward her. The spell hit, and McGonagall's body fell like a leaf torn from a tree. Voldemort smiled, intending to follow, to watch the students' faces as their beloved professor lay broken. Then a clear cry rang through the castle, the unmistakable cry of a phoenix. A streak of fire shot from the tower like lightning and caught McGonagall, bearing her away. The expression on Voldemort's face changed instantly. Energy had gathered at the top of the tower. A beam of blue light speared down toward him, sweeping over his position. For a heartbeat, it seemed as if he would be struck. Instead, he reappeared elsewhere, frowning at the spot he had just occupied. The beam had burned through air and death shroud alike, gouging a hole through the clouds and even clearing the dust above to reveal a wide sweep of starry sky, one the castle's children had never seen. Voldemort's face hardened. "Such destructive power," he muttered. "If that had hit me, worse than taking a bomb to the face." Night had fallen without anyone noticing. The battle had lasted from dinner until now. On the back of a huge spider, Hermione clung, spiders clambering over the pipes around them as they emerged into the castle. Hagrid rode beside her, carrying an unconscious Lucius Malfoy under one massive arm. High up on the tower, the Philosopher's Stone, set into the castle's defenses, flared, its energy being drawn into the castle itself. "Dumbledore's fine," Hagrid said, relief cracking his voice. "He's got the castle doing the defending." Hermione had no illusions about the stone. She had only borrowed its power temporarily. It belonged to Hogwarts and to its headmaster. After the battle, it would be put back. Relying on outside magic for too long was dangerous, but for now, they had to use every advantage. The spiders poured out through the castle's pipes and windows at a command from Aragog beneath Hagrid. "Let them loose! Hagrid, we need them inside!" Hermione shouted as she saw Hagrid hesitate. He worried about the student's fear of such creatures. There was no time for that now. If Hagrid did not take every chance to redeem himself with the students, when would he? Aragog's urgent hisses sent the spiders surging. They leapt from the windows and swarmed straight toward the green flame fighters. Screams rose when the first ones landed. Then Professor Sprout, organizing the defenders, shouted, "Don't panic! Children, our reinforcements have arrived." The effect was immediate. Terrified though they were, the students found new courage. Filch, fighting werewolves beside Firenze, barked, "Counterattack!" His hair somehow stayed perfectly slicked back as he struck with a cane fitted like a blade, leaving jagged wounds that even the werewolf's regeneration struggled to close. Firenze's precise archery pinned the beast, the arrows aimed at eyes and exposed spots, forcing it to rush and circle without countering properly. Without the combined assault from Firenze and Filch, the werewolves might have overwhelmed them. As the Acromantula joined the fray, the situation for the Death Side worsened. Even the Green Flame Party's elite, mages who could cast Avada Kedavra, were driven back again and again by the weight of spider numbers. Flitwick darted like a crackling ball of light, flinging obscure and relentless spells at Bellatrix Lestrange, whose only answer was brutal, wasteful power. She was breathing hard. The black-green sigils on her skin flickered. A death curse, she fired, devoured a flock of peregrines Flitwick had conjured, but she was then hammered with a volley of explosive charms that nearly toppled her. Lily and Snape fought more subduedly, neither giving quarter. The wasteland around them showed how costly each exchange was. "You're almost out of potions, aren't you?" Snape asked coldly. "Enough to kill you 100 times," Lily replied with grim certainty. Snape looked at her in a flash of something like regret. Had he been more, she might have been his. At the castle gate, Hagrid strode in, his face blackened, beard and hair singed, his body ragged from blaster marks. His lower half had become a vast, terrible spider. He still carried Lucius Malfoy under one arm, looking like a demon-beset lord. A few students shrank back, nearly ready to curse him on sight. Hagrid bellowed up at the dark figure in the sky. "Voldemort, your dog has been captured. Your conspiracies failed." Voldemort narrowed his eyes. Beneath him, his forces were fragmenting like a broken dam. He said coldly, "Remember this pain. Next time, you might not be so lucky." He glanced again at the tower. The energy thrumming there made him wary. In an instant, he dissolved into green mist. The mark of the Death Eaters in the sky thinned and began to fade. Seeing their master flee, the Death Eaters below turned to smoke and scrambled toward the shrinking breach in the barrier. It was the perfect moment to finish them. Harry and Ron burst out of the castle, wands held high, charging. Snape cast one last look at Lily, whipped his black cloak about him, and was gone through the gap. Bellatrix followed close behind, her hair singed clear away. She paid dearly to get free, one hand and half a leg lost, but she broke out. Not all escaped. Nearly half of the Green Flame Party were left trapped inside the barrier, overwhelmed by professors and students. Stupefy after stupefy knocked them out. Thereafter, they were bound in enchanted ropes. Hermione pushed through the crowd, grabbing people as she went. "Have you seen Professor McGonagall?" she asked breathlessly. Everyone shook their heads. "We saw her fly up on a dragon," one student said. "Then the dragon was ripped apart, and she fell." Hermione's heart dropped. She darted through the chaos. Some tended the wounded, others restrained the captive Death Eaters, and everyone did what they could. But someone was missing, who should have been here to coordinate it all, the deputy headmistress. For a moment she stood frozen in the open courtyard, the memory of frozen tundra and loss knotting in her chest. "Hermione!" Professor Sprout's voice was tired behind her. Sprout's face was streaked with dust and sweat. She had used her greenhouses as shields and blocked spells with plant wards. "Dumbledore wants to see you in the headmaster's office." "The headmaster's office?" Hermione repeated, stunned. "What's the password?" "Cockroach cluster," Sprout said. "Go by yourself. Poppy's overwhelmed." With that, she forced herself to move away and help Madame Pomfrey, who was already near breaking from the endless tide of injuries. 59. The Fading Sun. When Hermione stepped into the headmaster's office, the dimness made her skin crawl. It was darker than most places in the castle, as if someone had been reluctant to light the candles. Her eyes were drawn immediately to Professor McGonagall, lying on a stretcher, her robes and skin scorched. A phoenix perched beside her, its eyes overflowing with bright, vital tears. As the tears fell, wisps of smoke rose from the burned flesh, and faint sounds, flesh knitting and a brittle shell cracking, came from the stretcher. Her condition is very poor, but fortunately, Lord Voldemort did not use the killing curse, came a hoarse, weak voice from the shadowed side of the room. Hermione could make out only a long white beard and a shape seated behind the desk. Rage flared in her at the sight of the professor's state. Magic built in her like a storm. A scalding blue light flowed through her eyes and from the tip of her staff. With Voldemort, she said, gripping her staff until her knuckles went white, my hatred only grows. I swear, one day I will kill him. Portraits of past headmasters hung around the walls, but they all seemed asleep, silent and still. Don't let hatred consume you, my child. Come closer. Let me see you, Dumbledore said gently, and the voice startled her. Hermione stepped forward so he could see her properly and could finally see him. He was a humanoid figure, but not wholly human. He sat in a high-backed chair, one half of him still the frail old man people knew, the other half a white skull. Intricate magical sigils ran from the chair down to the floor like chains, binding him and keeping him from truly passing. Where one side of his face still bore flesh, the other was a beard-clad skull. In the empty sockets there shimmered a pearly, pulsating light. Within and around him ghosts gathered, drawn inward like tide into a rock pool. Hermione suddenly understood the purpose of Lucius's bell. Surprised, are you? Perhaps it's better than Rubus's appearance? Dumbledore made a wry, slightly self-deprecating joke. He looked helpless and apologetic at once. Using his flesh hand, he motioned for Hermione to sit and conjured a dish of candy, offering it to her. In truth, I should have died decades ago, he said, glancing at the small red stone set atop Hermione's staff. It is the Philosopher's Stone that keeps me alive, but it cannot heal what Gellert Grindelwald did to me. Hermione swallowed. Is Grindelwald stronger than Voldemort? He is much stronger than Tom, Dumbledore admitted, his voice carrying a hard, complicated note. The Elder Wand chose him. In this world, in his prime, he was invincible. For Hermione, who had seen Voldemort's power from afar and felt breathless with it, the idea of a wizard stronger than Tom Riddle was terrifying. Dumbledore snapped his fingers and a lemon sherbet appeared between them. Don't just stand there, he said. You always did love lemon sherbets. She took one, hungry. She had survived on half a rune spore for some time, and it showed. She chewed, then asked softly, Those ghosts, are they keeping you alive? Dumbledore did not evade the question. To protect Hogwarts, I had to use the Philosopher's Stone to absorb a catastrophic blast. That saved the school, but the stone stopped producing the elixir of life. The war then, fiendfire, constant detonations, goblin rebellions, Hogwarts needed me. I could not, would not, die. He looked at his skeletal left hand and continued, each word slow and flat. The other professors devised another way. With the consent of the school's ghosts, they drew them into me. Ghosts are the lingering dead, shadows that resist moving on. When many ghosts gather in one place, the border between life and death becomes thin. With a strong enough confundus charm, death itself might believe I had already passed and leave my soul be. Hermione nodded. It made a cruel kind of sense, but Dumbledore's face darkened. A high density of ghosts concentrated for too long turns the place into a dead land, he said. It becomes part of the other world. That rot would spread from my office outward until it engulfed the whole castle. I cannot let Hogwarts become that. So I must keep the school moving, wander it spatially, to disperse the effects of the ghosts. So that was another reason for 50 years of wandering, to keep the decay from settling. The castle had become a kind of drifting mausoleum, carrying the corpse of a half-divine will that refused to die. Hermione's eyes landed on a tall mirror set to one side. Both their reflections were visible in it. What do you see? Dumbledore asked, curious. Hermione felt a subtle pull, like being drawn in by the mirror. She did not resist. Dumbledore would not hurt her. In the glass she saw a tree, brilliant and warm, its branches laden with roasted chickens, steaks, lemon sherbets, and a great rune spore. Under it, professors and, impossibly, her parents, Harry and Ron, everyone lived together in a huge castle beneath the tree, laughing, happy and safe. Dumbledore chuckled, a rare clean laugh. The Mirror of Erised, it shows what our hearts most desire. He sighed. Once it served merely as a warning, now I must rely on it to keep going. Seeing Hermione's puzzled frown, he explained, Ghosts can fool the world, but how do you fool yourself? For years I could still move, even leave the castle. But as my heart dimmed, even the ghosts could not hold me. McGonagall found the mirror and placed it here. I must look upon myself as I was, alive and whole, so that I may deceive my own heart and keep the flame of life that should have long since gone out. No wonder only the Phoenix attended ceremonies now. Dumbledore could not leave his office. He existed as a safeguard in people's minds. "Do you want to keep living?" Hermione asked. Dumbledore's one intact eye regarded her, his half-moon glasses catching the candlelight. His tone was neither wholly bitter nor entirely content. "What I desire is for the world to return to what it was before the war, for this school and its children to be happy again. For that, I cannot die yet." Hermione heard the exhaustion in him, half a century's burden settling on bones and ghostlight. Yet, even like this, he dragged himself along the cliff's edge, stubbornly keeping a patch of blue sky for a precarious Hogwarts to shelter under. 60. No way out. "I have to thank you, Hermione. If it weren't for you, everyone in this school would have died," Dumbledore said sincerely. "Perhaps, as you once told me, one day I should lay down my burden and calmly embrace the death that should be mine. Perhaps there will be a warm fireplace, endless desserts, and thick wool socks." Hermione started. She had joked about that with Dumbledore at Christmas, and now she regretted it. She feared he might actually take it to heart and abandon his responsibilities. What would become of the orphans and widows in this castle that desperately needed rebuilding? "Professor, you can't just die like that. Professor McGonagall is critically injured and on the verge of death. Students are wounded all through the corridors. The owner of Malfoy Manor is still in our custody, and Lord Voldemort could return. None of that can be handled without you." Dumbledore chuckled. "I am not that willful. This old man will have to hold on a few more years yet, at least until you grow up." His eyes gleamed with memory. "It's a pity. Back then I thought Tom would be a worthy successor. He was clever and polite, talented and modest. Everyone admired him. When the apocalypse fell and I was teetering on the edge of death, he rose like the morning sun, and people found hope in him." "Lord Voldemort?" Hermione asked, puzzled. She pictured the figure she had seen in the sky, an omen-soaked thing of death, and it did not match the sun-like youth Dumbledore described. "How did he become what he is now?" "I was too impatient," Dumbledore said, regret in his voice. "I let him see my true form before he was ready. A skeleton and a ghost, a decaying thing trapped in a broken body, the terror of death consumed him. After that, he changed. He began researching the dark arts to escape death, to extend his life by any means, even at the cost of other lives. Even the most powerful white wizard, when faced with death, clings like an old dog. That is a pitiable sight, I fear for myself," Dumbledore continued, mimicking Voldemort's tone. "He said he would abandon this castle and leave with those who followed him, those who also sought eternal life." He absently stroked his cold, hard cheekbones. "If I had been more patient, waited until he was more mature before revealing everything, would the result have been different?" "No, Professor," Hermione interrupted calmly. "Hagrid and I discovered Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets, the basilisk hidden there, and poor Myrtle. If I remember correctly, Hagrid was framed by Tom back then, wasn't he? Even then, he was an evil man." Dumbledore hesitated. "Tom then? 6th year? No, 5th. Someone who only cares for themselves will not change with age. His hypocrisy was there from the start. He was the one who opened the chamber. You were all deceived by him." Hermione's voice was steady. Even if he hadn't become a madman terrified of death, his ambition and duplicity would have led him to ally with pure-blood extremists and seize power. Dumbledore sighed in the headmaster's office. "I must thank you. Your words ease my reproach. But, Professor, I'm only in 1st year. Were you not afraid I would be frightened?" Hermione laughed, trying to lighten the mood. "If I hadn't seen you and Hagrid fighting side by side, I might have feared for you too," Dumbledore admitted. "Forgive me for prying. Ghosts are my eyes. Honestly, I've never seen a child as brave as you. You outshine Tom in many ways, but what is most admirable?" He looked at her with that misty, solitary gaze. "You have a heart like the sun." Hermione took the Philosopher's Stone from her staff and handed it to him. "It should be returned to its rightful place." Dumbledore took it in his steady hand, and in a blink the brilliant core dissolved. Forgive me for not giving it to you. This castle still needs it. As promised, though, you may borrow its power from the fourth floor whenever necessary. Hermione nodded. What do we do next? About Malfoy Manor, Lucius, and Lord Voldemort. Dumbledore frowned. That is a headache. We repelled the invasion, but Minerva is badly hurt. He glanced at McGonagall, still being tended by the Phoenix. Negotiations with Malfoy Manor, dealing with the Death Eaters, and the warrant for the Green Flame Party all require handling those nobles. Apart from my able deputy, the other professors, Pomona is too straightforward, Lily is still young, and Phileas, well, he's part goblin. None are suitable for dealing with sly old aristocrats. Minerva has carried so much for me, he said, pitying the scars that marked McGonagall's body. She has acted as headmistress in every way, establishing authority and confronting those nobles. Without her, I have no one to rely on. Professor will recover, won't she? Hermione asked. Though Tom didn't use a killing curse, injuries of this severity will take at least half a month to heal, even with our best potion masters and healers, Dumbledore said. Hermione thought for a moment, then looked at the old man confined to his office, and suddenly an audacious idea formed. What if you could be freed? Dumbledore lifted a brow. The girl carefully took a tightly wrapped bell from her pocket, unfolded it, and set it on the table. This was taken from Lucius. Dumbledore made the bell hover and examined it. Ah, this contains deep dark magic, an instrument to summon death and control ghosts. No wonder it stirred the spirits inside me. I have heard of such an item. It must have come from the Borgin family. I did not expect Lucius to acquire it. Hermione hesitated, then explained, I have an idea that could completely change your condition. There's no turning back if we try, but if it succeeds, it could free you and these spirits and let you walk the world in your prime again. No turning back? Isn't that life? Dumbledore smiled. What is the cost? Dumbledore knew the magic world well. Nothing came without a price. Hermione met his gaze and spoke plainly. It will require great power, a portion of your ashes, this bell, and the Philosopher's Stone's energy. You would be unable to resist my commands afterward. She had learned of the spirit-calling bell. Princess Rani gave the Tarnished, an artifact that summons the strong from their ashes to fight for the summoner. The Borgin bell was compatible with that concept. With modifications and the professor's aid, she could make it work. Using the stone's boundless energy and Dumbledore's voluntarily offered ashes, she could bind his soul into a wraith that would obey her. Of course, she added quickly, I will not actually command you. It's only a means to release your power. When the day comes that you truly wish to embrace death, I will respect your wish and break the bond. Dumbledore stared into her eyes for a long moment, then his face softened into that familiar, inscrutable smile. Good child, you are truly different from Tom.